The familiarity comfort override. There is a powerful force in the human mind that often goes unnoticed, yet it shapes our choices, relationships, and even our pain. It is the pull of the familiar, a magnetic comfort in what we know, even when that familiarity brings hurt rather than happiness. This is the phenomenon known as the familiarity comfort override, where the brain prioritizes repetition and routine over truth or joy, locking us into patterns that feel safe but may be harmful. At its core, this override is about survival. From ancient times, familiarity signaled safety. The known path, the predictable face, the repeated habit, these were anchors in a chaotic world. The brain, wired for protection, finds security in repetition because it reduces uncertainty and threat. Even if the familiar situation causes discomfort or pain, its predictability can feel less terrifying than the unknown. Consider someone who stays in a toxic relationship. The cycle of hurt becomes a twisted kind of comfort, a pattern their brain recognizes and expects. The pain is real, but the uncertainty of leaving is greater. The brain's reward system, habituated to this repetition, suppresses the urge for change, convincing the person that familiarity, even if harmful, is safer than the risk of new beginnings. Neurologically, this happens because the brain's limbic system, the emotional center, forms deep connections through repeated experiences. Habits harden neural pathways, making familiar reactions almost automatic. This comfort override means the brain values the known loop, even if it perpetuates suffering, over the unpredictable search for truth or genuine joy. This override also explains why breaking free from negative patterns is so difficult. It's not just a matter of willpower, it's a biological tendency reinforced by years of repetition. The brain resists change because it threatens the safety net of familiarity, triggering anxiety and fear responses that can feel unbearable. The phenomenon extends beyond personal relationships to everyday life. We cling to routines, environments, and beliefs that no longer serve us simply because they are familiar. Change introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty activates the brain's alarm system, making us retreat to what we know, no matter the cost. But understanding the familiarity comfort override also offers a path to liberation. Awareness is the first step, recognizing that comfort tied to repetition may mask deeper pain or illusion. By gently challenging familiar patterns, practicing mindfulness, and cultivating curiosity, we can retrain the brain to value growth over mere survival. In therapy and personal growth, this means creating safe spaces to explore the unknown, to tolerate uncertainty, and to discover that joy and truth can exist outside old loops. Over time, new neural pathways form, rewiring the brain's reward system to embrace change and authentic happiness. So, when you find yourself drawn back to what hurts simply because it's known, remember this override is not a flaw, but a survival mechanism, one that can be understood, compassionately faced, and eventually transcended. The brain's comfort and familiarity need not be a prison. With patience and courage, it can become a bridge to freedom, where truth and joy replace repetition, and safety is found not in what's known, but in the brave embrace of what's possible. The trauma storage loop. Deep within the labyrinth of your mind lies a hidden chamber, a vault sealed tight by memory and pain. This is where trauma is stored, not like a wound open to the world, but like a shadow locked away in darkness. Your brain, in its relentless drive to protect you, buries pain so deeply that it reshapes the very architecture of your personality. It builds secret pathways, rewiring your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to avoid the triggers that threaten to unearth that buried agony. This is the trauma storage loop, a silent, relentless cycle where avoidance becomes survival. Your mind learns to navigate around pain like a river carving new channels to bypass a fallen tree. You may not remember the original hurt consciously, but your personality carries its weight. You become cautious where you were once carefree, withdrawn where you once reached out, guarded where you once trusted. The self you present to the world is a fortress, carefully constructed to keep the past from breaking through. Neuroscience reveals how trauma rewires the brain. The amygdala, your emotional alarm system, becomes hypersensitive, forever on edge. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and context, may fragment or suppress painful recollections. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reasoning and decision-making, fights to keep the trauma at bay. This biological ballet creates a loop where pain is never fully processed but perpetually deferred, cycling silently beneath the surface of consciousness. Imagine someone who experienced betrayal in early life. Without realizing it, they may develop a personality wary of intimacy, pulling away from relationships before trust can form. It's not simply fear, it's a complex adaptation, a rerouting of self designed to avoid the sting of the original trauma. Their laughter may be lighter, their smiles guarded, their heart armored. To the outside world, they seem distant or aloof. But within, the trauma storage loop hums quietly, steering behavior away from pain. This loop is insidious because it often operates below awareness. You don't always know why certain places, people, or feelings unsettle you. You just feel the pull to avoid, the hesitation to engage. It can shape your career choices, friendships, and even your view of yourself. The trauma becomes a hidden director, choreographing your life's dance without your conscious consent. But the trauma storage loop is also a testament to resilience. It is your brain's way of preserving you when the pain is too raw to face. By rerouting your personality, it creates a shield, buying time until you can build strength to confront the buried wounds. Recovery begins when you recognize the loop, not as weakness, but as a survival strategy turned habit. Awareness breaks the cycle, allowing healing to seep into the locked chambers of memory. Therapy, mindfulness, and self-compassion become tools to gently open that vault, to meet the pain with courage and kindness. It's a process of reintegration, bringing fragmented parts of the self back into harmony, rewiring not just for avoidance, but for connection and growth. The trauma storage loop can then transform from a prison into a passageway, a path toward a more whole and authentic self. You are not defined by the pain hidden in your mind's depths. You are the courage it takes to face it, the strength to rewrite the pathways, the grace to rebuild personality, not as a shield alone, but as a bridge to yourself and to others. The loop that once held you captive can become the spiral staircase leading upward toward freedom. The identity stability lock. You carry a story about who you are, a narrative carefully built over years, stitched together from memories, beliefs, and experiences. This story is your identity, your anchor in a world that often feels uncertain and chaotic. But this anchor can become a cage. When something arises that challenges the core of who you believe yourself to be, the mind reacts swiftly and fiercely. It blocks the challenge like malware, detecting a threat, erecting walls, shutting down pathways. Growth, which should be a journey, becomes a battlefield. This defense mechanism is as ancient as the human brain itself. Identity is not just a story. It is a survival strategy. To maintain a coherent sense of self, the mind protects against anything that threatens to disrupt the narrative. Change is not welcomed, it is feared. The unknown is dangerous. The new idea, the differing opinion, the unexpected emotion, each risks unraveling the carefully maintained stability of identity. Imagine a virus trying to invade a computer. The antivirus software acts immediately, blocking access, quarantining the threat, protecting the system's integrity. Your mind works the same way when your sense of self is at risk. The identity stability lock engages, refusing to allow in anything that might corrupt or confuse the story you rely on. This lock is necessary, but it is also limiting. It stops you from seeing beyond the boundaries you have set for yourself. When someone questions your beliefs, or when you face evidence that contradicts your self-image, your mind reacts with resistance. You might dismiss the challenge, rationalize it away, or attack the source. Sometimes, you retreat into denial or distraction. These reactions are not flaws. They are the mind's way of preserving stability in the face of potential chaos. But what if growth requires stepping through that lock? What if the very challenges you block are the keys to transformation? Growth is, at its core, a process of change, of letting go of old identities and embracing new possibilities. Yet, when the identity stability lock is engaged, the mind treats growth as a threat, not an opportunity. The fear of losing oneself can be more powerful than the desire to become more. This creates a paradox. To grow, you must be willing to risk losing the self you think you know. You must allow the lock to open, to let in discomfort, uncertainty, and vulnerability. You must face the possibility that who you were is not who you must remain. This is terrifying. It is easier to hold tight to familiar narratives, even if they limit you, than to open the door to the unknown. You see this in moments of personal crisis, when a job loss, a breakup, or a sudden change shakes your foundation. The identity lock reacts fiercely, resisting the upheaval, seeking to restore order. But true growth lies beyond this resistance, in the willingness to question, to explore, to redefine yourself. Psychology calls this phenomenon cognitive dissonance, the tension between what you believe and what you experience. Your mind strives to reduce this tension, often by rejecting new information. But transformation demands sitting with dissonance, allowing it to unsettle your sense of self until something new can emerge. This lock also explains why change is so hard, why habits persist, and why we cling to familiar identities even when they cause pain. The stability lock is a guardian, but sometimes a jailer. It keeps you safe from chaos, but can imprison you in patterns that no longer serve you. Awareness is the first step to unlocking this barrier. When you notice resistance, not as failure, but as protection, you can begin to gently coax the lock open. You can create space for new ideas, new feelings, and new ways of being. Growth becomes less a threat and more a journey of discovery. This requires courage and patience. It means sitting with discomfort, facing uncertainty, and allowing your story to change. It means embracing the fluidity of identity, knowing that who you are is not fixed, but evolving. The identity stability lock is not your enemy. It is a part of you trying to keep you whole. But to truly live, to grow, to thrive, you must learn to work with it, not against it. To recognize when it is protecting you and when it is holding you back. So, when you feel resistance to change, remember the lock within. Honor its purpose, but gently invite it to open. Trust that beyond the fear lies a broader self, one that is richer, deeper, and more resilient than you ever imagined. Because growth is not the loss of self, but the unfolding of who you are meant to become. The self-image firewall. You carry within you an image, a mental portrait of who you believe yourself to be. This self-image is a fragile fortress built over years of memories, experiences, and stories you tell yourself. It defines your worth, your capabilities, your place in the world. But this fortress is guarded fiercely by your mind's own firewall, a defense system designed to protect the identity you've constructed. Sometimes, this protection turns ruthless. It will lie to you, sabotage your progress, or reject even the most genuine offers of help, all to keep the image intact, no matter the cost. The self-image firewall is a psychological mechanism as old as humanity itself. At its core, it's about survival. Not just physical survival, but emotional survival. The mind fears that if the self-image cracks, if the narrative you cling to is challenged, you might lose more than just pride. You might lose your sense of coherence, your grip on reality, even your will to move forward. So, it erects barriers, filtering information and experiences to fit the story it wants to tell. This firewall can distort truth in subtle ways. It convinces you to deny failures or weaknesses, rewriting past events to preserve confidence. It whispers excuses that shield you from uncomfortable realities. When you face criticism or challenges, the firewall triggers defensiveness or denial, pushing away anything that threatens your self-concept. In extreme cases, it can cause self-sabotage, deliberate or unconscious actions that prevent growth or change because the mind prefers the familiar narrative over uncertain transformation. One of the most tragic aspects of the self-image firewall is its resistance to help. When someone offers support, advice, or a different perspective, the firewall sees this as a potential breach. Accepting help means admitting vulnerability, which can feel like betraying the carefully guarded identity. So, the mind may reject assistance outright or distort it, convincing you that you are fine alone, that you don't need change, or that the help offered is flawed or insincere. This firewall isn't a flaw, but a deeply ingrained survival tool. Early in life, it helps protect children from emotional overload, giving them a stable sense of self amidst chaos. But as adults, it can become a prison, locking you inside rigid self-beliefs that no longer serve you. The very mechanism meant to protect can isolate you, keeping you stuck in patterns of thought and behavior that limit your growth and happiness. Breaking through the self-image firewall requires courage and patience. It means gently challenging the stories you've told yourself, allowing space for uncertainty and imperfection. It means recognizing that vulnerability is not weakness, but a doorway to authentic connection and change. Support from others becomes a mirror, reflecting parts of you might fear but need to see. When you begin to soften the firewall, you open yourself to a fuller, richer experience of self. You learn that identity is not fixed, but fluid, capable of growth and healing. You discover that accepting help is not surrender, but strength. And most profoundly, you realize that the truest self is not the one defended by lies or denial, but the one who embraces complexity, pain, and hope all at once. The self-image firewall is a powerful protector, but it's not your enemy. It's a part of you, trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows. To live fully, you must learn to negotiate with it, to let it guard your core without shutting out the possibility of change. In that balance lies the path from defense to freedom, from illusion to truth, from isolation to connection. The emotional freeze protocol. When the floodgates of feeling burst open, overwhelming waves of emotion crash over you. Something inside your brain quietly flips a switch. It's not surrender or numbness, it's a deeply wired defense, a neurological armor designed to shield the mind from drowning in its own intensity. This is the emotional freeze protocol, a survival mechanism where your brain, sensing danger and excess feeling, steps back, shuts down the flood, and cloaks your consciousness in a veil of calm that isn't peace, but protection. Imagine standing at the edge of a storm, wind howling, rain lashing, thunder roaring, your body tense, heart pounding. But suddenly, the storm doesn't overwhelm you. Instead, you feel a strange stillness, a freezing of time and sensation, as if you've slipped beneath the waves and into a silent bubble where nothing touches you. This is what happens inside your brain when emotions surge too high, too fast. The circuits that process feeling, memory, and attention pull away, dampening your experience to keep you safe. Neuroscience reveals this is not just metaphorical. The brain's limbic system, home to emotion, and the prefrontal cortex, seat of reasoning, enter a complex dance. When emotion becomes unbearable, the brain activates regions that inhibit limbic activity, blunting feeling to prevent overload. Stress hormones flood the system, rewiring neural pathways and creating a state of hypoarousal where sensation and response are muted. It's a shutdown, but one with intent, a protective retreat, not a breakdown. This freeze is distinct from numbness caused by trauma or disconnection. It's a dynamic response. It arises in moments of acute stress, grief too sharp, fear too raw, pain too deep. It's the mind's way of saying, not now, I will carry this later. The emotional freeze protocol buys time, a neurological pause button that keeps you functioning when flooding feeling would incapacitate you. We see this in survivors of trauma, where dissociation or emotional shutdown is common. Yet, this protocol is not limited to extremes. Even everyday life tests it, when grief threatens to shatter, when anxiety rises like a tidal wave, or when heartbreak pierces too deeply. Your brain, sensing peril, blunts the edges, silences the storm to keep you afloat. But this armor is double-edged. While it guards, it also distances you from joy, from connection, from the very feelings that make life vibrant. The freeze can linger, becoming a barrier that keeps you safe but isolated. Recognizing it is the first step to gently re-engaging with emotion, to learning that safety can coexist with feeling. Therapies and mindfulness help recalibrate the brain, easing the freeze so emotions flow without drowning. They teach the nervous system to tolerate intensity, to hold pain and joy in balance. The freeze protocol is not permanent. It's a signal, a call for care. Understanding this deep survival mechanism reshapes how we see emotional shutdown. It is not weakness or failure, but the brain's fierce will to protect life and sanity. In this light, numbness is not absence, it is armor, worn silently by the mind to endure the unbearable. So when you feel that quiet pull away from feeling, know that inside, your brain is guarding you. It is waiting, watching, ready to lower the shield when the storm subsides, inviting you back into the full spectrum of life, stronger for the survival it enabled. The doubt-rejection reflex. There is a hidden reflex inside the human mind, a reflex so swift and powerful that it operates beneath conscious awareness, shaping how we process information, perceive truth, and protect the fragile architecture of our beliefs. This is the doubt-rejection reflex, an instinctive mechanism that compels us to reject any idea, no matter how logical or evidence-based, if it threatens our existing worldview. In this reflex, doubt is not a healthy skepticism or curiosity, but a perceived danger, a threat to the self that must be pushed away, often fiercely and without hesitation. At first glance, doubt might seem like an essential part of rational thought, a tool that sharpens understanding and guards against error. But beneath the surface, doubt also activates primal fear. When new ideas clash with the beliefs that define our identity and reality, the brain responds as if under attack. This triggers a defensive shutdown, closing the mind's gates to preserve stability, even at the cost of truth. Neuroscience sheds light on this process. The brain's amygdala, a small but powerful region linked to threat detection, lights up when we encounter information that challenges our core beliefs. This reaction is automatic, evolutionary, designed to protect us from harm. In the ancient world, cognitive consistency was survival. Uncertainty and contradiction could mean danger. Today, that same mechanism persists, compelling us to reject doubt before it unsettles our mental foundation. Consider a person who has long believed in a particular political ideology. When presented with facts that contradict their views, the doubt-rejection reflex may trigger an immediate emotional backlash: anger, denial, or dismissal. They don't merely debate the facts, they reject them outright, as if the truth itself were a weapon aimed at their identity. Logic and evidence are overshadowed by the urgent need to defend the self. This reflex is not limited to politics. It appears in science, religion, personal values, and social norms. For example, a patient might refuse to accept a medical diagnosis that conflicts with their self-image of health, or someone might dismiss scientific evidence that challenges deeply held spiritual beliefs. In every case, the mind prioritizes emotional safety over objective evaluation. Psychologists describe this as cognitive dissonance, a state of mental discomfort caused by holding conflicting ideas. The doubt-rejection reflex is the brain's rapid response to eliminate this discomfort, often by rejecting the conflicting idea outright. But this reflex can trap us in echo chambers, blind spots, and ideological rigidity, preventing growth and understanding. This dynamic can be seen in group behavior as well. Social identity theory explains how group membership shapes beliefs and attitudes. When doubt threatens group cohesion or shared identity, rejection becomes collective, not just individual. This intensifies polarization, making compromise or open dialogue difficult. Doubt becomes a social danger, not just a personal challenge. Yet, the doubt-rejection reflex is not an immutable flaw. Awareness of its existence is the first step toward transcending it. By recognizing the emotional roots of doubt-rejection, we can cultivate openness and resilience. Mindfulness practices, reflective thinking, and empathy help create mental space where doubt is no longer feared, but embraced as a pathway to deeper understanding. Examples abound of individuals who overcame this reflex. Scientists who challenged prevailing paradigms, Galileo, Darwin, Curie, faced intense rejection, not just for their ideas, but because their discoveries threatened entrenched worldviews. Their courage to tolerate doubt and discomfort transformed human knowledge. On a personal scale, individuals who confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, their relationships, or their past experience profound growth once they move beyond reflexive rejection. Understanding this reflex also invites compassion. When others reject ideas we find compelling, it may be less stubbornness and more survival instinct. Recognizing the emotional weight behind doubt rejection can foster dialogue rather than conflict, patience rather than judgment. In a world flooded with information, the doubt rejection reflex can be both a safeguard and a barrier. It protects us from chaos, but can imprison us in certainty. To live fully and learn deeply, we must gently loosen this reflex's grip, allowing doubt to be not danger, but discovery. So, next time you feel an immediate urge to dismiss a challenging idea, pause. Notice the emotional surge beneath your thoughts. Recognize the reflex guarding your worldview. In that moment of awareness lies the possibility of transformation, where doubt ceases to be a threat and becomes a bridge to truth, growth, and freedom. The ancestral fear lock. Some fears do not belong to you. They are shadows cast long before your first breath. Whispers of survival passed down through generations, encoded deep within your DNA. These are ancestral fears, ancient warnings etched into the fabric of your being, reactions older than your name, older than the memories you can recall. They rise unbidden, erupting in moments that seem disconnected from your experience, yet are tied to the echoes of your ancestors' struggles, dangers faced and narrowly escaped. Imagine the sudden, inexplicable panic when a harmless rustle in the dark sends your heart racing, or the irrational dread of places you have never visited. These fears are not born from your personal history, but from a biological inheritance, a warning system forged in the crucible of evolutionary threat. They are the remnants of times when every sound could mean predator or death, when vigilance was survival itself. Your body remembers what your mind cannot. Science is beginning to uncover how this ancient programming is more than metaphor. Epigenetics reveals that trauma, stress, and fear experienced by one generation can alter gene expression in descendants. The fears and reactions of your ancestors are carried forward, not just in stories, but in the very chemistry of your cells. A child born generations after famine or conflict may inherit a heightened sensitivity to scarcity or threat, not by learning, but by biology. Consider a family where fear of water runs deep, not because of personal trauma, but because ancestors once faced deadly floods or drowned in a tempest. The descendants may never have experienced such calamity, yet the fear pulses in their veins, shaping reactions and choices. Or the inexplicable fear of heights or confined spaces may be an echo of distant ancestors who survived by staying close to the ground or avoiding traps. These inherited fears act like locks, silent, powerful, and often unrecognized, keeping you tethered to a past survival imperative. This ancestral fear lock can be both protector and prisoner. It guards you, warning you away from danger you may not consciously understand. Yet, it can also trap you in patterns of anxiety, avoidance, and paralysis. The fears shape personality, behavior, and even physiology. Heart rates quicken, breath shortens, muscles tense, long before conscious thought catches up. They are the invisible chains of evolution, tightened by the echoes of ancient crises. The experience can be confusing and isolating. You may feel fear or anxiety that seems disproportionate or unfounded, a shadow haunting your present with no clear source. This disconnect can deepen distress, making it hard to separate your own fears from those passed down. But recognizing the ancestral origin is the first step to unlocking the chains. Understanding that some fears are gifts from the past, warnings encoded in survival's language, can empower you to reframe and release their hold. Healing these inherited fears requires patience and courage. It involves rewiring the mind and body through mindfulness, therapy, and self-compassion. It means creating new memories, new responses, new patterns that speak not to ancient threats, but to the safety of now. You honor your ancestors by acknowledging their struggles, but refusing to be imprisoned by them. You carry their legacy forward, transformed by awareness and choice. These ancient fears remind us that we are not isolated beings, but threads in a vast tapestry of human history. Our bodies carry the stories of countless lives, of triumph and tragedy, of survival and loss. In facing the ancestral fear lock, we confront not just our own shadows, but the collective shadows of those who came before. And in doing so, we begin to free ourselves, not just for today, but for generations yet to come. The fears that rise unbidden are not curses, but calls to listen, to understand, to heal. They ask us to look beyond our individual selves into the deep currents of time, to recognize the silent watchfulness of our lineage. And when we answer, when we unlock the fear and step beyond it, we reclaim not only our freedom, but the strength of all who walked before us, lighting a path toward a future unbound by the shadows of the past. The narrative glue mechanism. Your mind is a storyteller, weaving threads of experience into a tapestry that feels whole and meaningful. Every day you encounter countless events, some mundane, some extraordinary. But these events do not exist in isolation. Your brain pulls them together, crafting narratives that explain, connect, and give shape to the chaos. This narrative glue is powerful, but it is not always true. Sometimes it binds together fragments that never truly belonged, creating stories that comfort but deceive. The reason is simple. Randomness terrifies the brain. The universe is vast and unpredictable, filled with chance and chaos. But your mind craves order, patterns, and meaning. Without a story to explain why things happen, the world feels cold and meaningless. So your brain fills the gaps with narratives, sometimes beautiful, sometimes flawed, sometimes entirely false, to protect you from the abyss of randomness. Imagine a series of unrelated events, a phone call, a missed bus, a sudden rainstorm. Alone, they are disconnected moments, but your mind links them together. A missed bus caused by the call, which distracted you. The rainstorm, a sign of fate punishing you. These stories, whether accurate or not, give your experience coherence. They turn randomness into cause and effect, making the unpredictable feel manageable. This mechanism is a survival tool. Our ancestors depended on pattern recognition to survive, to know which signs meant danger, which behaviors led to food or shelter. The mind evolved to detect connections, even where none existed, because the cost of missing a real threat was greater than falsely identifying one. Today, this evolutionary gift can mislead, creating illusions of control and false causality. Stories shape your identity and your sense of agency. They explain your successes and failures, your relationships, and your place in the world. But when the narrative glue binds you to false stories, it can trap you in cycles of misunderstanding, regret, or fear. You might blame yourself for things beyond your control, see signs that aren't there, or hold on to illusions that keep you from facing reality. Consider the power of confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out and remember information that supports your existing beliefs. Your brain selectively glues together events that fit the story you want to tell about yourself or the world, ignoring contradictory evidence. This keeps your mental tapestry intact, but can distort your perception, limiting growth and understanding. Yet, the narrative glue is not inherently harmful. It is also the source of creativity, empathy, and meaning. Through stories, you connect with others, make sense of pain, and envision futures. The key is awareness, recognizing when your mind's stories are comforting myths rather than facts, and learning to hold space for uncertainty and randomness. Randomness need not be terrifying. Embracing unpredictability can free you from the constraints of false narratives. It invites humility, curiosity, and openness to new possibilities. When you allow yourself to see events as they are, sometimes unconnected, sometimes inexplicable, you begin to live more authentically without the weight of illusory coherence. The narrative glue binds your experience, yes, but you hold the scissors. With practice, you can choose which stories to weave tightly and which to unravel. You can seek truth, not certainty, and find peace in the spaces between the threads. So, when you catch your mind connecting dots that may not belong together, pause. Notice the story it tells and ask, is this story true? Is it helping me or holding me back? Can I sit with the mystery, the randomness, the unknown? In that moment, you step beyond fear. You embrace the beautiful chaos of life, where meaning is not given but created anew. You become both the weaver and the observer of your own story, a story grounded not in the tyranny of false certainty, but in the freedom of honest curiosity. Because in the end, the narrative glue is what holds us together, but it is also what we must learn to loosen so that new patterns, truer and richer, can emerge. The motivation drain valve. You pour your heart and soul into something, work, a dream, a relationship, only to be met with silence, indifference, or failure. The effort feels endless, the reward elusive, and slowly something inside begins to shift. The fire that once burned bright flickers and dims until one day, it feels as if your ambition has been drained away entirely. This is no simple case of giving up. It's your brain's survival mechanism kicking in, what we might call the motivation drain valve. When effort repeatedly fails to yield reward, your mind shuts off ambition, not out of laziness or weakness, but to conserve emotional energy in the face of relentless disappointment. Motivation is not just a feeling, it's a complex neurological process. The brain calculates effort versus payoff constantly, weighing the cost of pushing forward against the likelihood of success. When the scales tip too far toward failure, a protective valve opens, releasing the pressure by dampening drive and desire. This shutdown is a defense mechanism to prevent emotional exhaustion, burnout, and despair. It's the brain's way of saying, enough. Conserve your strength for battles that can be won. Imagine the athlete who trains tirelessly but never improves. the artist whose creations go unnoticed, or the employee who gives 110% but faces constant rejection or invisibility. Over time, the brain learns that effort does not bring reward. It rewires motivation circuits, turning down dopamine signals, the neurotransmitter tied to pleasure and reward, to reduce the pain of repeated failure. The once vibrant ambition becomes a muted echo, a quiet resignation settling over dreams that once burned fiercely. This phenomenon is visible in conditions like learned helplessness, where persistent failure teaches the brain that action is futile. In psychological experiments, animals subjected to inescapable shocks eventually stop trying to escape, not because they don't want freedom, but because their brains conserve energy by surrendering effort. Humans experience similar patterns. When effort seems meaningless, motivation drains away as a means of emotional self-preservation. But the motivation drain valve is not just about failure. It's about the deep emotional cost of hope deferred. When you invest hope, passion, and identity into a pursuit, only to be met with emptiness, the emotional toll is profound. To protect itself, your mind pulls back, dulling ambition to shield your core from relentless disappointment. This can manifest as apathy, cynicism, or numbness, feelings often misunderstood as laziness or lack of willpower. The drain valve's activation also explains why some people cycle between bursts of intense effort and long periods of stagnation. After pushing hard and facing repeated setbacks, the valve opens, and motivation wanes. Over time, with rest, new experiences, or renewed belief in possibility, the valve can close, allowing ambition to flow again. It's a dynamic, fluid process shaped by success, failure, and the brain's constant cost-benefit analysis. Understanding this mechanism invites compassion for yourself and others. When motivation falters, it's not simply a failure of character, but a protective response to emotional overwhelm. Healing and regaining drive require more than willpower. They demand rest, recalibration, and sometimes a reframing of goals to align effort with attainable rewards. It may mean finding new paths where effort is met with recognition, or redefining what success looks like. In relationships, this drain valve shows why repeated rejection or neglect extinguishes the desire to connect. The heart learns that reaching out only leads to pain, so it withdraws, conserving emotional energy. In careers, burnout often masks the valve's activation, as passion bleeds out under relentless pressure and lack of progress. Yet, this valve, while protective, can also become a prison if left unchecked. If motivation is permanently shut off, dreams fade, potential withers, and life's colors dull. The challenge lies in recognizing when the valve has opened and finding ways to gently coax ambition back, not by forcing, but by nurturing, restoring faith in reward and possibility. So, when you feel ambition draining, remember this valve exists to protect you, not to punish. It is the brain's silent guardian, a valve that opens to spare your emotional heart from shattering under the weight of relentless disappointment. And with care, patience, and renewed hope, it can close again, allowing your fire to burn once more, steady, fierce, and alive. The social role encryption. You step into a room and immediately something shifts. The way you stand, the words you choose, the rhythm of your voice, all recalibrate to fit the invisible code of the space. Your identity bends, molds itself to the expectations, norms, and roles demanded by those present. You are a colleague, a friend, a leader, a listener, different versions of yourself flickering in and out like encoded signals adapting to new frequencies. This is the dance of social role encryption, where who you are depends not just on who you are inside, but on the complex algorithm of the social context. At first, this fluidity feels like adaptability, a survival skill honed over millennia. Humans are social creatures, and the ability to read a room, to adopt the roles that fit, has allowed us to belong, to influence, to thrive. But beneath the surface of this social code lies a paradox. Some roles embed so deeply within us that they become more than masks. They become encrypted identities, layers of self so intertwined with performance that the line between role and self blurs, until we forget who we were before the code was written. Consider the parent who becomes the constant caretaker, whose every thought and action is filtered through the role of protector and provider. Over years, the identity of caregiver encodes itself into their neural pathways, shaping their self-perception and emotions. The moments when they step outside this role can feel disorienting, even threatening. Without the role, who are they? The role is no longer a performance, it is the self. Or think of the leader whose presence commands attention, whose voice carries authority in the boardroom or on the stage. Leadership becomes an encrypted part of their identity, a lens through which they interpret all experience. When stripped of the title or platform, they may feel a profound loss, not simply of status, but of self. The role has locked itself into the very core of their being. This phenomenon is not confined to adults in professional or familial roles. Children learn social roles through play and imitation, encoding expectations of gender, family, culture, and status long before they understand the fluidity behind them. These early encryptions set templates for identity that can harden over time, sometimes limiting authentic self-expression. Social psychologists call this process role internalization. The brain adapts, neuroplasticity allowing repeated behaviors, thoughts, and emotional responses associated with a role to become ingrained, automatic. The role becomes a default operating system. Yet, this system is a double-edged sword. It grants us coherence and belonging, but risks trapping us in identities not fully chosen. In some cases, when life circumstances change, retirement, divorce, loss, people experience what feels like identity collapse. The social role that once encrypted their sense of self dissolves, leaving a void where certainty once lived. Without the role, the self feels fragmented, uncertain, even lost. This is why role loss can trigger existential crises and deep psychological distress. But there is also potential for liberation. Becoming aware of social role encryption is the first step toward decrypting the self, recognizing that identity is not fixed, but layered, coded, and rewritable. Through reflection, therapy, and intentional change, individuals can unpack these layers, rediscovering aspects of self obscured beneath performance and expectation. The key lies in balance, honoring the roles that serve us while maintaining access to the authentic self beneath. It means allowing flexibility, cultivating spaces where we can step out of encoded roles and simply be. This is how resilience grows, how identity expands beyond social scripts. In a world increasingly defined by roles, online personas, professional titles, family expectations, the risk of losing ourselves to encryption grows. Yet, it is also a world ripe for decryption, for conscious recoding of identity that embraces complexity and authenticity. So, when you feel the pull to become someone else in a new room, remember, the role is a tool, not a prison. The encrypted layers of your identity are real, but not absolute. Beneath them lies a self waiting to be known, fluid and free, beyond code and context. This is the profound mystery of social role encryption, how we shape ourselves to the world, and how the world shapes us back. Sometimes so deeply we forget the self beneath the mask. But knowing this, we can begin to reclaim our true identity, writing new codes with intention and courage. The feedback armor lock. There is a powerful mechanism in the human mind that shapes how we react to the world around us, especially to the words and actions of others. This mechanism is what I call the feedback armor lock, a psychological defense so deeply embedded that it often triggers before conscious thought. When criticism arrives, even when it is offered with love and care, the brain instinctively perceives it as an attack. This reflex isn't a sign of weakness or arrogance, but a survival adaptation designed to prioritize emotional safety over growth. From an evolutionary perspective, emotional safety was paramount. Our ancestors relied on social bonds for protection, resources, and survival. Any threat to these bonds, real or perceived, could mean isolation, danger, or death. Criticism, no matter how constructive, activates ancient alarm systems in the brain, particularly the amygdala, which signals threat. The feedback armor lock engages instantly, shielding the self with defensiveness, denial, or withdrawal to protect fragile emotional terrain. This instinctive armor often misfires in modern life. In today's complex social and professional environments, criticism is a tool for learning and improvement, not a threat to survival. Yet, the brain's automatic response remains rooted in primal fear. This explains why many people react to feedback with resistance, anger, or avoidance, even when the intention behind the critique is kindness and support. Consider the workplace scenario where a manager offers constructive feedback. The employee's initial response might be to shut down or argue, feeling wounded rather than helped. This reaction isn't about the content of the feedback, but the brain's protective reflex kicking in. The feedback armor lock blurs the line between threat and growth, confusing emotional safety with danger. Psychologists recognize this pattern as a form of emotional self-preservation. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking, often struggles to override the amygdala's rapid threat response. This neural tug-of-war means that even well-intentioned feedback can be met with immediate emotional rejection before logic has a chance to process it. This dynamic is further complicated by personal history. Individuals who have experienced harsh criticism, trauma, or rejection may develop a hyperactive feedback armor lock, making them especially sensitive to any form of critique. For them, feedback, even loving feedback, can trigger memories of past wounds, intensifying the defensive response. Yet, growth depends on vulnerability, the willingness to expose oneself to discomfort for the sake of learning. Overcoming the feedback armor. Lock requires cultivating emotional resilience and trust. Mindfulness practices help by increasing awareness of automatic reactions, creating space to respond rather than react. Developing secure relationships where feedback is framed with empathy and respect can also soften defenses. There are countless stories of people who transformed their response to criticism by understanding this reflex. Athletes, artists, and leaders often describe initial resistance to feedback that, once overcome, becomes a source of strength and mastery. They learn to separate the emotional alarm from the message's value, allowing growth to flourish. The feedback armor lock is not a flaw, but a survival mechanism, one that has protected us through millennia. Recognizing it invites compassion for ourselves and others when criticism feels painful. It encourages patience, both in giving and receiving feedback, knowing that beneath defensiveness lies a deep need for safety and acceptance. In a world where honest feedback is essential for progress, learning to unlock this armor becomes a vital skill. It is the bridge from emotional safety to courageous growth, from defensive reaction to open-hearted transformation. When we can lower our shields and listen with curiosity instead of fear, criticism ceases to feel like attack and becomes the gift of possibility. So the next time you feel the sting of critique, pause and sense the armor locking around your heart. Gently breathe through the defense, remind yourself of the brain's ancient purpose, and choose to meet feedback not as threat, but as a step toward becoming your fullest self. The predictability preference circuit. In the vast complexity of the world, your mind seeks refuge in patterns. Not because these patterns are inherently good or even correct, but because they are guessable. Predictability offers a peculiar comfort, a sense of order amid chaos, a quiet promise that what comes next can be known, controlled, anticipated. It is this preference for certainty over possibility that shapes much of human behavior, a circuit wired deep into your brain, guiding you toward the familiar even when it limits your freedom. The predictability preference circuit is born from evolution's pragmatic need for survival. In ancestral times, recognizing patterns, such as the migration of animals, the changing seasons, or the warning signs of predators, was essential. The brain developed to favor information that could be predicted and repeated because certainty meant safety. This biological wiring remains, even in a world vastly different from that of your distant ancestors. Your mind is a pattern-seeking machine, scanning the environment, hunting for cues that reduce uncertainty. When you encounter something new, your brain quickly tries to fit it into known frameworks, categories, or stereotypes. The comfort of prediction outweighs the thrill of discovery because the unknown carries risk that triggers anxiety, hesitation, and resistance. Certainty, even flawed or limiting, is often preferred to the jagged edge of possibility. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. You might choose a familiar route home rather than exploring a new path, not because it is shorter or more scenic, but because you know what to expect. You stick to routines, habits, and traditions because they reduce the cognitive load and emotional volatility that novelty demands. Even in relationships, careers, or beliefs, the pull of predictability can outweigh the lure of change. Neuroscience reveals that this preference is linked to the brain's reward system. Dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation, spikes not just in response to rewards, but also to patterns that confirm expectations. When your predictions come true, your brain is rewarded, reinforcing the cycle. When outcomes are unpredictable, dopamine levels can fluctuate wildly, generating discomfort or even fear. This biochemical feedback loop shapes your inclination to prefer guessable patterns. But predictability has its paradox. While it offers safety, it can also become a cage. By clinging to familiar patterns, you may limit growth, creativity, and adaptation. The certainty you crave may blind you to new opportunities or solutions. The very circuits that protect you from fear can also keep you trapped in cycles of stagnation. The challenge lies in balancing the comfort of the known with the courage to embrace uncertainty. This preference also explains why humans often create narratives, stories that simplify complex realities into understandable sequences. These narratives, whether personal or cultural, offer frameworks where events follow expected patterns, heroes triumph, and chaos is subdued. Even when the world is messy and unpredictable, these stories provide a mental anchor, a semblance of control. Yet, the unpredictability of life persists, crashing against your need for certainty. Moments of surprise, failure, and disruption expose the fragility of patterns. When your expectations are shattered, the predictability preference circuit kicks into overdrive, generating anxiety and resistance. You scramble to restore order, to find new patterns, or to retreat into what is familiar. In this tension between certainty and possibility lies the essence of human experience. Growth requires stepping beyond predictable patterns, venturing into the unknown with curiosity and resilience. It is a dance between the comfort of the safe and the promise of the new. Your brain's wiring pulls you towards stability, but your spirit often yearns for exploration. Understanding this circuit allows you to recognize when your preference for predictability serves you and when it limits you. It invites you to question which patterns are truly beneficial and which are habitual prisons. It encourages you to cultivate awareness, to embrace uncertainty not as a threat, but as a space of potential. So, next time you find yourself drawn to the familiar, ask, is this choice born of true wisdom or of a circuit craving safety? Can I lean into the discomfort of the unknown, trusting that growth lies there? The predictability. Preference circuit is not an enemy to defeat, but a part of you to understand. A guide that both protects and challenges, inviting you to balance the need for certainty with the courage to live in possibility. In this balance, you find freedom, not in controlling every outcome, but in navigating the unfolding patterns of life with awareness and grace, honoring both the safety of predictability and the wonder of possibility. The looping thought lock. Your mind is a complex labyrinth, filled with corridors of thought that wind endlessly. Some thoughts come and go like passing clouds, light and fleeting, but others return, again and again, persistent, unyielding. These looping thoughts seem stuck, replaying in your mind's theater without pause. You try to push them away, but they pull you back, louder, more insistent. Why do some thoughts trap you in their grip while others drift away? The answer lies deep in your brain's survival circuits. Long before you were aware of yourself, your nervous system evolved to detect threats and protect life at all costs. When something triggers these ancient alarms, fear, uncertainty, pain, the mind shifts into a state of hypervigilance. Thoughts connected to survival activate loops that keep replaying, like a warning siren that cannot be silenced. This looping thought lock is a protective mechanism. It is the mind's way of keeping danger at the forefront, forcing your attention to what it perceives as urgent. But in the modern world, where many threats are subtle or imagined, this protective lock can become a trap. The same circuits designed to keep you safe now imprison you in cycles of worry, rumination, or fear. Imagine standing in a room with a fire alarm that never stops ringing. Your attention is captured entirely by the noise. You cannot focus on anything else. The looping thought is that alarm, your brain's way of saying, pay attention, danger. But when the alarm is false or persistent beyond reason, it becomes exhausting, draining your energy and peace. The thoughts that loop most often are tied to survival. Will I be safe? Am I good enough? What if something goes wrong? These questions fire the ancient circuits that once helped your ancestors stay alive in a hostile world. Now, they echo endlessly in your mind, even when the danger is not immediate or real. The looping thought lock explains why anxiety and obsessive thinking are so hard to escape. Your brain is stuck in a feedback loop, caught in the circuitry of protection. You might try to reason with these thoughts, but logic often falls short because the loops operate below conscious awareness. They are primal, automatic responses wired into your survival system. Understanding this mechanism offers a path to compassion and change. When you realize that these looping thoughts are not your fault, but a legacy of evolution, you can begin to work with them instead of fighting them. Techniques like mindfulness, grounding, and cognitive reframing create space around the loops, weakening their hold. You learn to observe the alarm without being overwhelmed by it, to notice the thought without becoming the thought. This awareness is the key to unlocking the loop. It does not erase the survival circuits, but teaches you to respond with calm rather than panic, to let the alarm sound without losing yourself in it. The looping thought lock is both a prison and a protector. It is your mind's way of keeping you safe, even when safety is an illusion. By gently loosening its grip, you reclaim your freedom, stepping out of the endless cycle into a place of peace and clarity. So when you find yourself trapped in looping thoughts, remember, these are ancient circuits doing their job. You are not broken. You are wired to survive. And with patience and practice, you can unlock the loops, quiet the alarms, and find your way back to stillness. Because the mind is not just a prison, but also a sanctuary waiting to be rediscovered. The inherited shame filter. You carry a weight, though you cannot name its origin. It presses down not from your own mistakes or choices, but from shadows cast long before you were born. This is the inherited shame filter, an unseen lens shaped by generations, coloring how you feel guilt and responsibility for things you never did. It's a subtle, pervasive force woven into the fabric of your environment, training you to carry burdens that are not yours, yet somehow feel inescapably personal. Shame is a powerful emotion, designed by evolution to keep social bonds intact and guide behavior. But when shame crosses generations, it transforms into something more insidious. Families, communities, and cultures pass down narratives laden with failure, taboo, and blame. These stories become embedded in the emotional climate of a household, shaping how children learn to see themselves and the world. Even without explicit words, the atmosphere teaches what is safe to feel and what is not, who is responsible for pain, and which parts of self must be hidden or punished. This inherited shame filter operates like a shadow identity. You might feel guilt over ancestral traumas, unspoken abuse, poverty, exile, discrimination, or cultural taboos your family endured. You might carry shame linked to histories of silence, failure, or survival strategies that required hiding parts of yourself. The filter distorts your self-perception, amplifying feelings of unworthiness or blame in situations where no direct fault exists. You become entangled in a web spun by those who came before, their unhealed wounds coloring your emotional landscape. Psychologists recognize this phenomenon in studies of intergenerational trauma. Descendants of survivors, whether of war, slavery, or systemic oppression, often exhibit symptoms of guilt, anxiety, or self-sabotage unrelated to their own experiences. The shame is transferred through family stories, behaviors, and even epigenetic changes influencing stress responses. It is a haunting inheritance, invisible yet profoundly real. The environment, family dynamics, cultural norms, societal expectations acts as the training ground for this filter. Children absorb subtle cues, a look of disappointment, an unspoken expectation, a family secret kept at all costs. Over time, these shape a lens through which you interpret your worth and actions. You may find yourself apologizing for feelings or mistakes that aren't yours, overcompensating to avoid imagined blame, or feeling undeserved guilt for outcomes beyond your control. Breaking free from the inherited shame filter is a profound act of courage and healing. It requires recognizing that much of your guilt is borrowed, that the burdens you carry are shared shadows, not your personal failures. Therapy, storytelling, and community can help unravel these threads, revealing the origins of shame and reclaiming your right to self-compassion. In shedding this filter, you reclaim space to define your own identity, unbound from ancestral blame, free to embrace your worth on your own terms. The journey is neither quick nor easy, but it is transformative. It allows you to carry your history with acknowledgement rather than shame, to honor ancestors without inheriting their pain, and to live with a lighter, more truthful heart. Remember, the guilt you feel for things you never did is a legacy, not a verdict. You are not the sum of ancestral burdens, but the beginning of a new story, one written with awareness, healing, and hope. The inherited shame filter may have shaped you, but it does not have to define you. The avoidance memory trap. ChatGPT said, "You reach into the depths of your mind, searching for the memories that once gripped you with fear, moments so vivid they shaped your every breath, your every step. But they have slipped away, faded into shadowy corners, erased from conscious recall. You think you've escaped the past, that forgetting means freedom. Yet, beneath the surface, your choices continue to orbit the very fear you cannot remember. This is the avoidance memory trap, a paradox where forgetting does not mean release, but camouflage. The mind hides the pain, yet the shadow it casts still guides your life. Our memories are not perfect archives, they are living stories, rewritten each time we recall them, edited to protect us from unbearable truths. When trauma or fear overwhelms, the brain may deliberately suppress or block memories, a survival mechanism to shield consciousness from pain too intense to bear. But this erasure is not absence, it is concealment. The fearful experience retreats from awareness but remains encoded in the unconscious, shaping emotions, impulses, and decisions in ways we barely understand. Think of a person who forgets a childhood abuse, yet carries a persistent unease, a vague sense of danger without knowing why. Their relationships falter. Trust is elusive. Anxiety flares unpredictably. Their choices, where to go, whom to trust, how to react, are influenced by memories they cannot access, fears they cannot name. The shadow guides their orbit, unseen but powerful. Neuroscience reveals that suppressed memories leave biochemical traces. Neural pathways etched by trauma do not vanish. They alter brain chemistry, hormone levels, and stress responses. The body remembers what the mind forgets. This embodied memory influences behavior, avoidance, hypervigilance, emotional shutdown, even when the original cause is obscured. This trap is a double-edged sword. Forgetting protects you from collapse, but camouflage breeds repetition. Without conscious access to the fear, you cannot confront or resolve it. Instead, your life becomes a dance around shadows, avoiding triggers, sidestepping pain, repeating patterns rooted in forgotten wounds. You may wonder why certain situations provoke discomfort, or why your choices feel limited, unaware that the answers lie in a past you cannot see. Psychology calls this implicit memory and repression. It explains why therapy often uncovers unexpected memories, why trauma work can feel like peeling back layers of concealment. Healing begins when camouflage is lifted, when the shadows are brought into light and the mind can face what was once unbearable. But this process is neither easy nor guaranteed. The avoidance memory trap is cunning. The mind resists exposure, guarding its secrets fiercely. Memories may resurface as fragments, dreams, or sensations, disjointed and confusing. The path to clarity demands courage, the willingness to face fear without the promise of certainty or comfort. Yet, in that facing lies freedom. To remember is to reclaim power, to understand the roots of your choices, and to redirect your orbit consciously. Memory becomes not a prison, but a tool for transformation. The shadow, once hidden, becomes a guide, a map of survival and resilience. This is the paradox of forgetting. It is not erasure, but disguise. The fear you sought to flee lives on in your patterns, your emotions, your very biology. Only by unveiling the camouflage can you step beyond the trap, breaking the cycle that binds you to the unseen past. So, when you sense an invisible force steering your choices, a shadow with no face, know that your mind may be protecting you. Yet, it also calls you to remember. The journey through the avoidance memory trap is a path toward wholeness, where fear is met, understood, and finally released. The attention bias magnet. There is an invisible force within our minds that acts like a magnet, pulling our focus relentlessly toward danger, discord, and discomfort. This force is known as the attention bias magnet. It shapes the way we perceive the world, causing us to notice threats more readily than peace, conflict more clearly than calm. This bias is not a flaw, but an ancient survival tool, honed through millennia to keep us alert to what might harm us. From the dawn of humanity, our ancestors faced constant dangers: predators, rival tribes, environmental hazards. Those who were quick to notice threats survived. Those who ignored warning signs did not. The human brain, shaped by this harsh history, developed an automatic preference for negative or threatening stimuli. This means that even today, when immediate physical danger is rare, our minds are wired to scan for what could hurt us. Neuroscience reveals that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, plays a pivotal role in this process. It acts like a sentinel, detecting potential threats and signaling the rest of the brain to pay attention. This triggers heightened awareness, faster reactions, and stronger memory encoding for negative events. The result is that threatening information captures our attention more powerfully than neutral or positive stimuli. Consider how news media capitalize on this bias, flooding us with stories of violence, disaster, and conflict. Our brains latch on to these narratives because they speak to our survival instincts. Peaceful or joyful news, by contrast, often fades into the background, lacking the urgency that demands our focus. This skewed perception can distort our understanding of reality, making the world seem far more dangerous and divided than it truly is. The attention bias magnet also affects interpersonal relationships. We are more likely to notice criticism, anger, or rejection than kindness, harmony, or affection. Small conflicts stand out vividly, while moments of calm may pass unnoticed. This can create cycles of misunderstanding and tension, as our minds emphasize what threatens connection rather than what nurtures it. However, awareness of this bias opens the door to change. Mindfulness practices train us to notice this automatic pull without being swept away by it. By consciously shifting attention toward positive experiences, gratitude, compassion, beauty, we can recalibrate the brain's focus. Studies show that regular attention to positive stimuli can weaken the grip of threat bias, fostering greater emotional balance. This doesn't mean ignoring danger or becoming naive. The attention bias magnet served us well in survival, and it still alerts us to genuine risks. But by understanding its influence, we gain the power to choose where to place our attention, to balance vigilance with openness, caution with curiosity. In the daily rush of life, the world will always present threats and conflicts. Yet, within us lies the capacity to notice peace and calm with equal clarity. By recognizing the magnetic pull of threat bias, we reclaim agency over our perceptions, cultivating a vision of the world that includes not only what might hurt us, but also what can heal, connect, and inspire. So, when your mind zeroes in on danger or discord, remember the ancient wiring beneath. Pause, breathe, and choose to look beyond the magnet's pull. In doing so, you open yourself to a fuller, richer experience, one where peace is not overshadowed by threat, and calm shines as brightly as conflict. The emotional investment lock. There is a silent prison many find themselves trapped within. A lock forged not of steel or chains, but of emotions already spent. You stay in bad situations, not because you want to, but because your feelings have been exhausted. The investment you made, the hope, the love, the effort, has become a weight too heavy to abandon. It is as if walking away would mean admitting that all that energy was wasted, and so you remain, shackled by the very emotions that once gave you strength. This is the emotional investment lock. A paradox where what once fueled your passion now binds you in place. The heart grows weary, but the mind fears the void that leaving might create. You calculate losses, weigh futures, but the memory of what you've poured in makes letting go feel like a betrayal of yourself. You become a prisoner to the past investment, even as the present corrodes your well-being. Psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy, a cognitive trap where past investments irrationally influence present decisions. The more you've given, time, energy, love, the harder it becomes to detach. Even when the situation is clearly harmful, your brain craves consistency, avoiding the painful acknowledgement that the investment was lost. The lock tightens with every moment spent trying to salvage what cannot be saved. Imagine the partner who stays in a toxic relationship, convinced that years of shared memories demand endurance. The colleague who endures unbearable stress, unable to walk away from the career they've labored for. The friend who tolerates betrayal, bound by the history of trust once built. Each is caught in the emotional lock, held hostage by the weight of what has already been given. This lock is not just psychological, but deeply emotional. Feelings become depleted, hope thins, patience wears, love dims, but exhaustion does not free you. Instead, it anchors you. Your emotional reserves run dry, yet the lock's grip remains, forged by loyalty, guilt, fear, and the ghost of what once was. It is a slow erosion of self, a quiet surrender disguised as commitment. Breaking free requires recognizing the lock itself, the illusion that investment equals obligation. It demands courage to face loss, to accept that sometimes love, effort, and time cannot rescue a sinking ship. Freedom lies in valuing yourself above past expenditure, in choosing well-being over wasted devotion. To unlock this prison is to reclaim agency, to rewrite the narrative from "I must stay" to "I deserve better." Healing begins with compassion for yourself, for the hope that drove you, for the pain endured, for the strength shown in staying so long. It is a process of gentle dismantling, shedding layers of guilt and fear, and building boundaries that honor your worth. The emotional investment lock may be strong, but the human spirit's desire for freedom is stronger. You are not defined by the lock, nor by the walls it built around you. You are defined by the moments when you choose to step away, to breathe fresh air, to seek light beyond the prison. The past investment becomes not a chain, but a teacher, a reminder that your energy is precious, your feelings valid, and your future unwritten. So when you feel held captive by feelings already spent, remember, the lock exists only as long as you believe it must. You hold the key. The choice to unlock it is the choice to honor yourself, to embrace possibility, and to live with the freedom your heart has always deserved. The meaning-making algorithm. You assign purpose to pain, weaving it into the fabric of your life story, hoping to redeem what hurts, to find meaning where there is suffering. It feels essential, this act of meaning-making, as if without it, the pain would be unbearable, senseless, a void too vast to hold. But what if sometimes the meaning you find is not a revelation, but noise? Noise your mind creates to silence the chaos that threatens to unravel you. Pain is raw and wild. It crashes over you like an endless storm, fierce and untamed. In the face of this, the mind reaches for structure, for order, a narrative that can explain, contain, and transform the agony into something manageable. This is the meaning-making algorithm at work. It is a survival tool, a way to stitch fragments of brokenness into a pattern that feels whole. Consider the survivor of loss who tells themselves that their suffering has a purpose, that it has made them stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Or the person who endures hardship, believing it is a test, a trial, a chapter in a story that will end in triumph. These narratives provide solace. They anchor the soul, turning chaos into a meaningful journey. But meaning is not always a balm. Sometimes it is a distraction, a clever noise the mind generates to quiet the unbearable silence of randomness and pain. You might assign blame, create villains, or invent lessons where none exist. You might tell yourself stories of destiny or fate, of karma or justice, not because these are true, but because the alternative, accepting the chaos, is too frightening. History is full of such examples. Think of the countless tragedies, disasters, and heartbreaks that people have sought to explain with grand narratives. Wars fought in the name of higher causes, suffering justified by promises of redemption, personal pain framed as destiny. These stories can inspire and empower, but they can also blind and bind, trapping us in cycles of meaning that resist questioning. The meaning-making algorithm can turn pain into a cage. You might cling to a painful identity because it feels familiar and significant. You might find comfort in martyrdom or victimhood because these roles provide a story that holds you even as it confines you. You might resist letting go of certain beliefs because to do so would be to face a void where meaning once lived. At times, the noise of meaning drowns out your own voice. You become a storyteller caught in a loop, repeating explanations that no longer serve growth or healing. You convince yourself that every scar has a reason, every wound a lesson, every loss a cosmic plan. Yet, underneath there is a quiet ache, the recognition that some pain may be meaningless, random, simply the chaos of existence. This is a difficult truth. To accept that not all suffering carries purpose is to confront the abyss. It is to face the universe's indifference and the fragile randomness of life. But paradoxically, in this acceptance, there can be freedom. When you stop forcing meaning onto pain, you open space for genuine healing, uncluttered by the noise of imposed stories. Healing then becomes not about explaining, but about feeling. Not about crafting narratives, but about presence. You allow yourself to sit with pain without rushing to fix or understand it. You learn to hold the silence, the confusion, the chaos, without fear. In this space, meaning may arise organically, or it may not. But you are no longer captive to the need for it. Consider the artist who paints not to tell a story, but to express a feeling that words cannot reach. Or the meditator who sits in stillness, embracing emptiness without judgment or explanation. These are examples of moving beyond the meaning-making algorithm, engaging with pain as experience, not problem to solve. The meaning-making algorithm is powerful, but it is not infallible. It can guide you to insight or lead you astray. Your task is to become aware of when you are seeking genuine understanding and when you are drowning out chaos with noise. This discernment requires courage, humility, and patience. In the end, pain is part of the human condition. Wild, mysterious, often without clear purpose. But your response to it is where meaning can be found or lost. To weave pain into a story is natural. To recognize when that story is just noise is wisdom. So when you find yourself reaching for meaning in suffering, pause. Listen deeply to the pain itself, not just the narrative around it. Allow space for silence and uncertainty. Trust that healing does not always need explanation, and that sometimes the absence of meaning is its own profound truth. Because in the stillness beyond the noise, you meet yourself, raw, whole, and unbound by the stories you tell. And there, perhaps, is the truest form of redemption. The label imprisonment effect. You receive a label, smart, anxious, kind. It may come from others or from the quiet voice inside yourself. At first, it feels like a description, a simple word meant to explain who you are. But over time, this label grows into a cage. The brain, wired to seek consistency and predictability, begins to conform, bending your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to fit the label's mold. This is the label imprisonment effect, a subtle yet powerful force where identity becomes a prison, suffocating growth and authentic expression beneath the weight of expectation. Labels are essential shortcuts for the brain. They help us categorize people, experiences, and ourselves quickly. Being called smart can open doors, kind can build trust, and anxious can explain difficult feelings. Yet, the very clarity labels provide can become chains. Once assigned, the brain works tirelessly to maintain internal consistency, filtering experiences through the lens of that identity. If you are labeled smart, your brain will prioritize evidence supporting intelligence and dismiss moments of failure or confusion. If anxious, your mind may amplify worry to match the expected pattern. If kind, you may suppress anger or selfish desires to remain good. This effect manifests profoundly in childhood and adolescence, when identity is most malleable. A child praised relentlessly for academic excellence may internalize smart as their defining truth. Their brain adapts, reinforcing habits, thought patterns, and emotional responses that align with intelligence. But what happens when curiosity leads to mistakes, or vulnerability reveals uncertainty? The label resists change, creating inner conflict and self-judgment. Failure becomes a threat, not just to achievement, but to self-worth itself. Similarly, those labeled anxious or shy may unconsciously reinforce avoidance and worry, solidifying patterns that limit their potential. The brain's drive for consistency can trap individuals in self-fulfilling prophecies, where labels shape behavior that confirms the very identity they wish to transcend. This imprisonment is suffocating, an invisible cage that narrows the vast possibilities of who you can be. Examples abound. Consider the gifted student who hides struggles to maintain the smart label, sacrificing mental health for appearance, or the kind person who suppresses anger so completely they lose touch with their true feelings. The anxious individual who avoids new experiences, convinced their label dictates their fate. These stories reveal how labels, while helpful, can distort the rich complexity of human identity into rigid caricatures. Neuroscience explains this through neural pathways and confirmation bias. The brain strengthens circuits that align with repeated behaviors and beliefs. Labels act like scripts, guiding thoughts and emotions toward predictable patterns. Breaking free requires conscious effort, introducing new experiences that challenge the label, practicing self-compassion, and embracing the fluidity of identity. The label imprisonment effect also intersects with societal expectations and stereotypes. Cultural narratives assign roles and labels based on gender, race, class, and more, compounding the pressure to conform. The brain's desire for consistency means that breaking out of imposed labels can provoke anxiety and resistance, both internally and externally. Yet, liberation is possible. It begins with awareness, recognizing the labels that shape you and the ways they limit your authentic self. It involves daring to question and rewrite the scripts written by others, or even by your own fears. Embracing contradictions, mistakes, and growth as part of a dynamic self dissolves the prison walls. In this freedom, identity becomes a living, evolving story rather than a fixed label. You reclaim the power to be smart and vulnerable, kind and assertive, anxious yet courageous. The suffocation of labels gives way to the breath of authenticity, complexity, and resilience. So, if you find yourself trapped by a label, remember, it is not a verdict but a starting point. Your brain's need for consistency is natural, but your capacity for change is greater. By stepping beyond labels, you open space for a fuller, richer existence, one where who you are is not confined by words, but expanded by the endless possibilities of becoming. The learned helplessness seal. You feel the weight before you even begin, a heaviness that settles deep in your chest, a quiet surrender that comes not from choice, but from experience. When failure has knocked too many times, when attempts have met walls again and again, your brain learns a bitter lesson. To protect you from pain, it locks the door before you even try. This is the learned helplessness seal, a neurological shutdown, where safety becomes stillness and the mind ceases to fight the world's resistance. It is not laziness or defeat. It is a survival mechanism shaped by repeated loss. Imagine a child trying to solve a puzzle, struggling with shapes that never fit. Time after time, they try and fail. Eventually, the child stops reaching, stops searching. Not because they cannot, but because the brain has learned that effort leads nowhere. This learned helplessness is not limited to childhood. It shadows lives of all ages who face relentless challenges. It seeps into minds battered by failure, trauma, neglect, or chronic stress, sealing hope behind an invisible lock. Psychologist Martin Seligman first identified this phenomenon through experiments with animals subjected to inescapable shocks. The animals, after repeated exposure, stopped attempting to escape, even when escape was possible. Their brains had encoded a truth. Effort was futile. This was not mere resignation, but a profound adaptation to protect from hopelessness. Humans exhibit the same pattern. After too many defeats, the will to act can falter, and the mind retreats into passivity. This seal manifests in many ways. Depression often carries its imprint, a numbing stillness where motivation vanishes, where the future feels like a closed book. Chronic illness, poverty, systemic oppression, anywhere repeated adversity exists, learned helplessness can take root. The mind, overwhelmed by persistent failure, chooses safety and inertia rather than risk and effort. Yet, this stillness is a paradoxical prison. While it protects from further pain, it also traps potential and possibility. The locked door keeps the world out, but also keeps life's growth and change locked away. Choices shrink, dreams fade. The mind settles into patterns of passivity, reinforcing the seal with every avoided attempt. But learned helplessness is not immutable. The brain's plasticity means that new experiences can rewrite old codes. Small successes, sometimes even imagined ones, can crack the seal. Support, encouragement, therapy, and gradual challenges help reawaken the drive to act. The journey out of helplessness is slow and requires patience, but it is possible. Consider a person who, after years of setbacks, begins to trust that effort can matter again. The first step might be small, a conversation, a hobby, a new routine, but each act of engagement reshapes neural pathways. Over time, hope rekindles, and the door begins to unlock, not fully but enough to let light in. Understanding the learned helplessness seal reframes how we view failure and motivation. It teaches compassion for ourselves and others. When someone appears stuck or unmotivated, it may not be willful laziness, but a deeply ingrained survival strategy. Healing requires breaking the seal gently, creating environments where safety and possibility coexist. In your own life, recognize when the seal forms, when fear of failure silences your actions before they start. Know that this stillness is a sign, not of weakness, but of a brain trying to protect itself. With awareness, courage, and support, you can begin to unlock the door, one small step at a time. The learned helplessness seal is both a warning and a beacon, a call to notice when safety has become stillness and an invitation to reclaim movement, agency, and hope. The mirror neuron cage. There is a hidden mechanism in our brains that quietly shapes how we experience the world and ourselves, a mechanism that blurs the line between who we are and who we perceive others to be. This is the realm of mirror neurons, specialized cells that fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we observe someone else performing the same action. They enable us to imitate pain, mimic fear, and absorb the emotions of those around us, creating a profound empathy that binds us together. But beneath this connection lies a haunting question. What if your choices were never truly your own, just echoes of what you have witnessed? Mirror neurons were discovered in the 1990s by neuroscientists studying monkeys, and since then, their role in human cognition has fascinated researchers. These neurons are thought to form the biological basis of empathy, imitation, and social learning. When you see someone wince in pain, your mirror neurons fire as if you are experiencing that pain yourself. When you watch fear in another's eyes, your brain responds with the same emotional resonance. This mirroring helps us understand and connect with others deeply, but it also means our emotions and behaviors can be influenced, sometimes unconsciously, by those around us. Imagine a child growing up in a household where anger is common. Through mirror neuron activity, the child does not just witness anger, they begin to embody it, mirroring those emotional patterns in their own responses. Over time, these mirrored behaviors can solidify into habitual reactions, making the child's choices less about personal agency and more about internalized echoes from their environment. The same applies to adults. Social groups, media, and relationships can all imprint patterns that our mirror neurons replicate. This biological wiring raises unsettling questions about free will. If our brains automatically mirror and absorb emotions and actions, to what extent are our decisions truly our own? Are we acting from authentic desire, or simply echoing the moods, fears, and pains we have internalized from others? The mirror neuron cage is the invisible framework trapping us within patterns not entirely self-generated, where identity becomes a complex interplay of personal experience and external reflection. Consider the contagiousness of fear during a crisis. When panic spreads through a crowd, it's not just a social phenomenon, but a neural one. Mirror neurons amplify the fear response, turning individual anxiety into collective hysteria. In such moments, the line between personal emotion and group influence dissolves, and choices, whether to flee, freeze, or fight, may be less conscious decisions and more automatic echoes of the surrounding panic. Artists and performers also experience the mirror neuron effect vividly. When watching a moving play or dance, audiences often feel the emotions portrayed so intensely, it seems they live the experience themselves. This neural empathy, while enriching, also demonstrates how deeply our minds are tuned to mirror and absorb external states, sometimes at the cost of our own emotional autonomy. Yet, the mirror neuron cage is not an unbreakable prison. Awareness of this mechanism empowers us to recognize when our feelings and choices might be reflections rather than origins. Through mindfulness, self-reflection, and intentional distancing from overwhelming external influences, we can begin to disentangle the echoes from our authentic selves. Therapeutic approaches often focus on this differentiation, helping individuals identify patterns learned through mirroring and develop personal agency. By consciously examining the source of our emotions and behaviors, we create space to choose responses that align with our true values and desires, rather than automatic imitations. This journey from echo to origin is deeply challenging. It requires confronting the uncomfortable truth that our minds are not isolated islands, but porous landscapes shaped by countless interactions. It asks us to question the narratives we have accepted as our own, and to forge new pathways of self-definition beyond inherited patterns. In the end, the mirror neuron cage reveals the profound interdependence of human experience. Our brains are designed to connect, to share, to to resonate. This is both a gift and a challenge, a reminder that identity is not a fixed point, but a dynamic dance between self and other. So, as you move through the world, feeling the pull of others' emotions and actions, ask yourself, which of these are truly mine? Where do my echoes end and my own voice begin? In that questioning lies the possibility of freedom. A freedom not from connection, but from unconscious mirroring, allowing your choices to emerge from the authentic core of who you are. Because to live fully is to step beyond the cage of echoes and claim the raw, unmirrored light of your own being. The spiritual bypass circuit. You use positivity like a shield, bright, reflective, and blinding. It's a dazzling armor worn to avoid the piercing light of truth. Beneath the surface, wounds ache and truths fester, but the brain fuses belief with denial, crafting a sparkling mask that conceals pain beneath layers of glittering optimism. This is the spiritual bypass circuit, a silent, insidious loop where positivity becomes a means of evasion, not healing. In a world hungry for hope, positivity feels like a sanctuary. It promises relief, strength, and light. Yet, when wielded as a defense, it becomes a barrier, shutting out reality instead of embracing it. The brain, desperate to protect itself, blends belief and denial until the line blurs. You tell yourself, everything is fine. This too shall pass. I choose happiness. These mantras echo like incantations, drowning out the subtle cries of the wounded self beneath. The spiritual bypass circuit is more than wishful thinking. It's a psychological mechanism born of vulnerability and fear, a way to keep painful feelings at bay by focusing solely on the positive. But when positivity masks avoidance, it stunts growth. The wounds left unacknowledged fester, hidden beneath the glitter, but never truly healed. Denial becomes the soil where unresolved pain takes root. Consider the person who insists on gratitude while suppressing grief, who radiates joy yet cannot face loneliness, who preaches light while shadows grow in silence. Positivity becomes their mask, their fortress, but inside the circuit spins. Denial circling with belief, a dance of concealment. It is not weakness, but survival, a desperate attempt to keep despair from consuming. Neuroscience shows how the brain seeks patterns that reduce distress. Positive beliefs activate reward centers, releasing dopamine, giving a fleeting sense of well-being. But if this response overrides the processing of painful truth, emotional wounds remain locked away, unresolved, and unhealed. The circuit perpetuates itself. Positivity feeds denial, denial fuels avoidance, and the soul's deeper needs go unmet. Healing begins when the glitter falls away, when courage allows truth to surface, raw and unvarnished. It requires embracing pain, acknowledging wounds, and sitting with discomfort without the rush to fix or mask. True resilience is born not from denying the dark, but from meeting it with open eyes and an open heart. The spiritual bypass circuit can then be rewired, not to avoid truth, but to integrate it with hope. You are not your mask, nor the glitter that hides your scars. You are the whole, the light and shadow, the joy and sorrow, the courage to face what is real. Positivity is a gift when it heals. It becomes a trap when it blinds. To break the circuit is to live authentically, to honor the wounds as much as the wisdom, and to find peace not in avoidance, but in truth. The achievement trap. Lock. You live in a world where achievement is currency, where success measures your worth and defines your value. Every milestone, every accolade, every moment of praise fuels the relentless engine inside you, the drive to perform, to prove, to surpass. But beneath this pursuit lies a hidden prison, the achievement trap lock. Your mind grants you rest only when you have earned it through accomplishment. Peace becomes a prize withheld until you produce proof. This lock is forged from deep within your brain's reward system. The dopamine pathways light up with every victory, reinforcing the habit of tying self-worth to performance. You learn early that success brings relief, praise, and acceptance, while failure threatens rejection and shame. Over time, the lock clicks shut, your sense of self tethered to external markers of achievement, and your internal peace conditional on proving your value. Imagine the endless cycle. You push yourself harder, chase the next goal, ignore the fatigue and doubt, believing rest and contentment lie just beyond the next accomplishment. Yet, when you arrive, peace is fleeting, never fully yours, because the lock demands another proof, another success, another step forward. The mind's internal gatekeeper does not open for stillness, only for productivity. This creates a paradox where peace and rest feel out of reach unless earned through constant doing. Your achievements become a currency to buy fleeting moments of calm, but the price keeps rising. You measure your worth by what you produce, and when performance dips, anxiety and self-doubt rush in. You become trapped in a loop where rest is not a natural state but a reward, and the lock refuses to release until you pay in success. The achievement trap lock explains why so many burn out despite outward success. You may appear accomplished, admired, and driven, but inside, the lock cages you. Peace denied, rest withheld, happiness conditional. Your brain's survival circuits mistake relentless striving for safety, not realizing that without rest, the system will collapse. Breaking free requires recognizing the lock for what it is. A learned pattern, not a truth. Your worth is not solely in what you achieve, but in your inherent being. Peace is not a prize to win, but a state to nurture. Rest is not a reward, but a necessity. When you begin to shift this mindset, you start to loosen the lock's grip. Practices like mindfulness, self-compassion, and radical acceptance help you claim rest without proof. You learn to sit with discomfort, to find value in being rather than doing. You discover that peace can coexist with imperfection, that rest can be embraced without guilt. Slowly the lock begins to open. It takes courage to resist the achievement trap, especially in a world that glorifies constant doing. But freedom lies in reclaiming your right to rest, to peace, to worth beyond performance. When you grant yourself permission to simply be, the lock yields, and a new way of living unfolds, one where success is no longer a prison, but a part of a balanced, vibrant life. So when you feel the pressure to prove, to earn your peace through achievement, remember this: your mind's lock is not your destiny. Rest is your birthright, and peace is waiting on the other side, not earned, but given. Unlock the cage with kindness, patience, and trust in your own worth, beyond the metrics of success. Because true peace is not won. It is realized within you, always. The incompletion anxiety switch. You carry them with you. Unfinished tasks, incomplete conversations, half-formed plans, ghosts that linger at the edges of your mind. They hover like unfinished symphonies, puzzles missing pieces, or doors left ajar. To your brain, these incompletions don't just represent work left undone. They signal danger, chaos, and uncertainty. This triggers what we can call the incompletion anxiety switch, a primal response where the brain floods you with urgency, pushing you to obsess, overdo, and scramble toward closure. But this frantic drive often backfires, breaking you under the weight of mental clutter and paralyzing the very progress you seek. From an evolutionary perspective, our ancestors survived by detecting and responding to threats. Uncertainty was dangerous. A broken pattern or unfinished business might mean lurking predators or lost resources. So, the brain developed a bias toward completion, a psychological itch demanding to be scratched. In the modern world, this bias manifests as anxiety over incompletion. Your mind refuses to let go, cycling endlessly through tasks, worries, and what-ifs, until the loose ends are tied, the tasks checked off, the problem solved. This switch flips with a familiar intensity. You find yourself returning again and again to emails unanswered, decisions postponed, projects stalled. You obsess over details, fearing that letting go means failure or loss of control. The more incomplete things pile up, the louder the mental noise grows, cluttering attention and energy. Instead of freeing you, this drive to complete consumes you, fraying patience and resilience. You push harder, overdoing your efforts in a desperate bid for control. Late nights, multitasking, relentless to-do lists become the norm. But the paradox is cruel. The very obsession with finishing can cause burnout and mistakes, creating more incompletion in its wake. The brain, overwhelmed, switches from focused urgency to exhaustion and freeze, trapping you in cycles of stress. Consider the student who can't stop revising a paper, fearing imperfection. The professional drowning in unfinished reports. The parent anxious over undone chores and unreturned calls. Each is caught in the grip of the incompletion anxiety switch, where the safety-felt enclosure is chased relentlessly, even when it undermines well-being. Neuroscience sheds light on this. The brain's dopamine system, tied to reward and motivation, responds strongly to task completion. Checking off an item triggers a dopamine release, a fleeting relief and pleasure. But when many tasks remain undone, the lack of reward creates tension and anxiety. The switch becomes a cycle. Anxiety drives effort. Effort struggles against overwhelm. Overwhelm fuels more anxiety. Breaking free requires awareness and strategy. Mindfulness can help you notice when the switch flips, allowing you to pause before obsession takes hold. Prioritization and realistic goal setting ease the pressure of too many loose ends. Accepting imperfection and incompletion as natural parts of life releases the grip of anxiety. Rest and boundaries protect your mental resources from overload. The incompletion anxiety switch is a signal, a reminder that your brain seeks safety and order, but it also warns against letting that drive become a prison. Life is inherently unfinished. Acceptance of this truth creates space for calm, creativity, and genuine progress. So, when the urge to obsess rises, remember, not everything must be perfect or complete now. Sometimes, peace comes not from closure, but from embracing the beautiful mess of incompletion. In that acceptance, you find freedom from the switch and a softer path through life's endless projects. The nostalgia distortion loop. You settle into a quiet moment, your mind drifting backward through time, chasing memories wrapped in golden light. You recall a laughter-filled afternoon, a tender embrace, a place where everything felt right. But as you reach into that past, something strange happens. The sharp edges, the conflicts, the heartbreaks, the mundane struggles fade away, leaving only warmth and comfort. Your brain, it seems, remembers not the full truth, but a softened version, a nostalgia distortion loop that lures you into longing for moments that never truly existed as you recall them. This loop is more than sentimental daydreaming. It is a neurological pattern deeply embedded in the architecture of memory itself. Our brains do not store perfect recordings of past experiences. Instead, memories are reconstructed each time we access them, shaped by emotion, expectation, and time. The unpleasant details often blur or disappear, while the feelings of warmth, safety, and happiness glow brighter. This selective memory bias creates a loop, a cycle of yearning not for reality, but for an idealized echo. Consider the way photographs from childhood seem to glow with a golden filter. You remember family gatherings as peaceful and joyful, forgetting the arguments or the quiet loneliness that coexisted with the smiles. The brain's tendency to emphasize positive affect over painful reality helps protect mental health, but it also distorts the past. It rewrites history in softer hues, creating a comfort zone in memory that can feel like a refuge, but also a trap. This phenomenon is reflected in the science of memory consolidation and emotional tagging. Emotional significance affects which memories are prioritized and how they are encoded. Positive experiences often form stronger, more accessible pathways, while negative or neutral ones fade or are suppressed. The brain is wired to favor survival through hope and pleasure, to foster motivation by highlighting good times. But this biological optimism can backfire, setting us adrift in longing for an imagined past. Nostalgia's distortion extends beyond personal history. Societies, too, fall into collective nostalgia loops, idealizing the good old days while forgetting systemic injustices, hardships, or failures. This selective memory shapes culture, politics, and identity, creating narratives that comfort but also obscure truth. The past becomes a mythic place, simultaneously real and unreal, a dreamscape that both heals and deceives. In your own life, this loop plays out in subtle ways. You revisit a lost friendship, recalling only the laughter and connection, ignoring the drift or pain that ended it. You romanticize a place you once lived, forgetting the struggles, the restlessness. The brain filters out the painful to preserve the warmth. But this filter also clouds judgment, leading to repeated attempts to recapture moments that exist only in distorted memory. Psychologically, this can lead to a cycle of dissatisfaction and idealization, longing for a past that never fully existed, while struggling with the imperfect present. It creates an emotional tug-of-war where reality feels hollow against the glow of remembered warmth. Yet, understanding the distortion loop offers insight and release. Recognizing that memory is a creative act, shaped by emotion and time, allows you to approach nostalgia with compassion and clarity. Therapeutic practices often work to ground memory in fuller truth, acknowledging pain alongside joy, complexity alongside simplicity. This balance helps break the distortion loop, freeing the mind to cherish the past honestly while engaging fully with the present. The nostalgia distortion loop is a reminder of the brain's desire to protect us through selective memory, to wrap us in comfort when faced with life's hardships. But it is also a call to awareness that longing may be for a dream, not a reality. By embracing the fullness of memory, with all its light and shadow, you reclaim both your past and your present. So when nostalgia beckons, inviting you into warmth and longing, remember the loop beneath. Feel the comfort it offers, but also see the distortion it creates. In this awareness lies freedom, the chance to honor your history without becoming captive to its idealized shadows. The past is never perfect, but it is real. And in its reality, you find the strength to move forward, carrying warmth, not as illusion, but as a resilient ember lighting your way. The self-observation jam. You find yourself trapped in a silent loop, endlessly observing your own actions as if you were a spectator rather than a participant. This is the self-observation jam, a psychological limbo where you watch yourself live, critique your thoughts, and rehearse every possible reaction, not in the heat of the moment, but from a detached, analytical distance. Instead of fully experiencing life as it unfolds, you become locked in an internal feedback loop, rehearsing life rather than living it. This phenomenon arises from the mind's craving for control and perfection. We instinctively try to manage our image, anticipate outcomes, and avoid mistakes. So, when faced with an interaction or decision, the brain floods us with a running commentary. What should I say? How will they react? Did I make a good impression? This mental rehearsal feels productive, yet it traps us in a paradox. By focusing so intensely on how we appear and what might happen, we detach from the immediacy of experience. Neuroscience shows that self-awareness activates brain regions involved in reflection and evaluation, such as the prefrontal cortex. While self-awareness is essential for growth, excessive monitoring creates cognitive overload, reducing spontaneity and emotional connection. The result is a freezing effect, where you miss the richness of the moment because you are busy analyzing it in real time. Imagine standing at a party, wanting to join a conversation. Instead of stepping forward, you replay countless scenarios inside your head, judging your words and mannerisms. Time slips away. The conversation ends. The opportunity to connect is lost, not because of external barriers, but because your mind was caught in the jam of self-observation. This mental paralysis extends beyond social settings. In creative work, sports, or everyday decisions, overthinking and self-criticism can stall action. The self-observation jam becomes a thief of presence, robbing life of its vibrant unpredictability and transforming living into mere simulation. Psychologists link this to perfectionism and anxiety. When self-worth hinges on flawless performance, the mind's watchdog grows hypervigilant, scrutinizing every thought and gesture. This hyper-self-focus, while meant to protect, ironically leads to missed moments and regret. Breaking free from the self-observation jam requires cultivating acceptance and presence. Mindfulness practices teach us to notice thoughts without judgment and to gently return to the flow of experience. By loosening the grip of the inner critic and embracing imperfection, we reclaim the ability to engage fully with life. There is a delicate balance to strike between reflection that guides growth and observation that stifles action. Learning to shift from the spectator's seat back into the arena restores vitality and connection. So, when you catch yourself rehearsing life instead of living it, pause and breathe. Let go of the script in your mind and step into the moment's rawness, the unscripted, unpredictable dance of existence. In that surrender lies freedom, where life is no longer watched from afar, but lived deeply, with all its messiness and grace. Because to live fully is to move beyond the jam, to become not just the observer, but the vibrant, imperfect participant in your own unfolding story. The vulnerability shield lock. You want connection, a genuine bond with others, a shared truth that breathes life into your soul. But deep within your brain, a silent alarm sounds. Exposure, vulnerability, openness. These are read as danger. To the primal mind, bearing your inner self is a risk, a threat to survival. So you armor up. You build walls, fortresses of protection, thick layers of defense, and then you call it strength. The vulnerability shield lock is born, an invisible barrier shaped by fear, mistaken for resilience. This lock is woven from the ancient wiring of your nervous system, where threat and safety are etched in survival's language. When you show weakness, the brain's fear centers light up like warning signals. The amygdala, your sentinel of danger, triggers fight, flight, or freeze. To survive, you withdraw, mask your true feelings, and retreat behind shields. The paradox is that this armor, meant to protect, becomes the prison that isolates you, keeping the very connection you crave out of reach. Imagine the person who smiles brightly, speaks confidently, but keeps their deepest fears and desires locked away. They navigate life like a soldier in armor, unguarded yet protected, open yet shut down. To outsiders, they seem strong. But inside, the shield weighs heavy, a constant tension between yearning and defense. Every attempt at closeness is met with hesitation, every invitation for intimacy shadowed by the instinct to shield. This lock distorts your experience of strength. True strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to face it. Yet, when vulnerability is perceived as threat, strength becomes a masquerade, a performance of invulnerability, denial, and control. You convince yourself that to armor up is to survive, to be strong, when in truth it is a defense against pain, rejection, and loneliness. Science confirms this dance. The brain's default protective response to emotional exposure evolved to guard against social exclusion, which once meant death. Today, even in safe relationships, these ancient circuits can hijack your ability to trust and open up. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, battles with cortisol, the stress chemical, in a tug-of-war that shapes how you relate. The vulnerability shield lock is a neurochemical battle inside, fought with invisible armor. Consider the friend who keeps conversations light, avoids sharing pain, or the partner who deflects emotional questions. Their shields protect them from immediate hurt, but deep in the distance, the pain of disconnection grows, masked by bravado and silence. The lock tightens, and the paradox deepens. The more you shield, the more isolated you feel. The more isolated you feel, the more you shield. Breaking free requires awareness and courage. It begins with recognizing the lock for what it is, a protective reflex, not a true strength. It means learning to tolerate discomfort, to lower the shield slowly, piece by piece, in safe spaces. Therapy, mindfulness, and authentic relationships become tools to dismantle the armor, revealing the vulnerability that is the seed of genuine connection. This journey is neither quick nor easy. The shield was forged over years, perhaps a lifetime, in moments of pain and fear. Lowering it risks wounds, rejection, and uncertainty. But it also opens the path to belonging, empathy, and love. True strength emerges, not from hiding behind the shield, but from carrying it gently, while stepping into the light. You are not your armor. Beneath it lies a heart that longs to be seen and known, a spirit brave enough to be vulnerable. The lock may keep you safe, but it cannot keep you whole. To unlock it is to reclaim connection, to embrace the messy beauty of human intimacy, and to discover that true strength is born in the courage to be exposed. So when you feel the instinct to armor up, pause, breathe. Remember that connection is not a threat, but a lifeline. Your shield is not your strength, your vulnerability is. And in that truth lies the freedom to live deeply, love fully, and be truly seen. The loss aversion override. You prefer to clutch a broken thing rather than face the void of having nothing. This instinct, this fierce resistance to loss, is wired deep into your brain, shaping your choices in ways you rarely notice, but that govern your life's rhythms. Loss aversion is the powerful override that makes pain from losing feel far heavier than joy from winning, twisting your decisions, your relationships, your very sense of security. Imagine holding a cracked vase. It leaks water, is fragile, and sometimes spills. Yet you keep it, gripping tightly, afraid that letting it go will leave your hands empty, the cold emptiness worse than the mess you endure. This is the paradox at the heart of loss aversion. The dread of loss outweighs the desire for gain, and so you settle for less, for broken, for incomplete, because the fear of nothingness is greater than the hope for something better. The brain's wiring for loss is ancient, born from millennia when survival depended on avoiding threats rather than chasing rewards. Evolution prioritized loss, avoidance, because the cost of losing food, shelter, or safety was often death. This primal instinct remains, lurking beneath your modern mind, coloring your choices with shadows of fear and hesitation. You see loss aversion in everyday life, holding on to toxic relationships, clinging to jobs that drain you, resisting change because the familiar pain feels safer than the unknown. You stay in a place that no longer serves you because the prospect of losing the security it offers feels unbearable. The pain of loss weighs more heavily than the potential pleasure of gain, and your mind overrides hope with caution. Consider the gambler who refuses to walk away after losses mount, convinced that quitting means losing everything, even as losses deepen. Or the investor who holds on to failing stocks to avoid realizing a loss, despite better opportunities elsewhere. In relationships, loss aversion binds hearts to patterns of pain, because the terror of abandonment is stronger than the promise of freedom. Loss aversion is not irrational, it is deeply human. But it can be a prison, a force that overrides reason and stifles growth. When the brain's loss circuits dominate, you become trapped in a cycle of fear and avoidance, unable to risk loss, even when gain beckons. Your mind prioritizes preservation over possibility, freezing you in place. Breaking free requires awareness and courage. Recognizing that your brain's loss aversion is an ancient protector, not your enemy, allows you to approach change with compassion rather than judgment. You learn to weigh losses and gains more equitably, to accept that loss is a part of life's ebb and flow, and that holding on to broken things may cost more than letting go. Psychological studies show that framing choices in terms of potential gains rather than losses can shift decision-making. Mindfulness and cognitive reframing help reduce the grip of loss aversion, allowing space for hope and renewal. Therapy and support can also guide you through the pain of letting go, teaching you to tolerate uncertainty and embrace new possibilities. There is profound strength in facing loss head-on. To release the broken vase is to empty your hands, yes, but also to invite new things in. It is to trust that the void is not nothingness, but a fertile ground for growth and healing. You learn that loss does not have to mean emptiness. It can be transformation. So when you feel yourself clutching the broken, ask, what am I truly afraid to lose? Is it safety, identity, love? And what might I gain if I dare to let go? The brain's loss aversion override is powerful, but it is not absolute. With courage and insight, you can unlock the hold it has over you, stepping into a life where loss is honored but not feared, where you choose possibility over paralysis. Because in the dance between loss and gain lies the rhythm of living, not perfect, not safe, but deeply, beautifully human. The confirmation bias lock. You believe you are right. The facts, the feelings, the world around you, all align to prove your truth. And yet, this certainty may be less a reflection of reality and more the product of a hidden force inside your mind. The confirmation bias lock. It's a powerful, invisible mechanism by which your brain seeks out evidence that supports what you already believe, while ignoring, dismissing, or reshaping everything that contradicts it. Your mind edits reality, not out of malice, but to preserve emotional comfort, to keep the fragile structure of your worldview intact. This lock secures you in a loop of self-validation, filtering perception through the narrow lens of what you want to be true. Confirmation bias is fundamental to human cognition. Your brain is constantly bombarded with vast amounts of information, too much to process fully. To cope, it creates shortcuts, mental filters that prioritize information, confirming your beliefs, and disregard what challenges them. This cognitive shortcut feels efficient and reassuring. After all, embracing uncertainty and contradiction is exhausting, even threatening. The confirmation bias lock provides a mental sanctuary, a place where your identity, values, and emotions can feel safe, coherent, and unshaken. But this lock has a darker side. By selectively attending to confirming evidence and rejecting dissent, you become trapped in echo chambers of your own making. You interpret ambiguous facts to fit your narrative, selectively remember events that support your views, and discount voices that offer alternative perspectives. Your mind edits reality to match the emotional comfort of being right, even when the truth is more complex, nuanced, or uncomfortable. Consider relationships. If you believe a friend is loyal, you may overlook signs of betrayal, rationalizing away doubts. If you think someone dislikes you, you notice every slight and ignore warmth. The confirmation bias. Locke skews perception, turning relationships into mirrors, reflecting only the beliefs you hold, rather than the full picture. This distortion can fracture connections, breeding misunderstanding and mistrust. In politics and ideology, this lock fuels polarization. People consume news and opinions that reinforce their existing worldview, retreating into tribes where dissenting views are unwelcome. The brain's craving for certainty leads to rigidity, intolerance, and division. Even when confronted with facts disproving their beliefs, the confirmation bias lock resists, protecting the emotional investment in identity and group belonging. Scientists and researchers face this challenge too. The peer review system and replicability crisis reveal how confirmation bias influences studies. Choosing hypotheses, interpreting data, and publishing results that align with expectations. Awareness and rigorous methodology aim to break the lock, but the human mind naturally seeks comforting narratives. On a personal level, the lock may protect you from painful truths. If you've convinced yourself of a hopeful outcome, recovery, success, love, the bias helps maintain hope against overwhelming odds. But hope founded on selective perception risks deeper disappointment. The lock's protection can become a cage, preventing growth, adaptation, and healing. Breaking free from the confirmation bias. Lock demands humility and vigilance. It requires conscious effort to seek out opposing views, question your assumptions, and embrace uncertainty. Critical thinking, open dialogue, and emotional resilience help loosen the lock's grip. But even then, the lock may re-engage, luring you back into the comfort of familiar certainty. This cognitive lock reminds us that reality is not a fixed image seen clearly, but a fluid mosaic shaped by perception, emotion, and bias. The truth often lives beyond our comfortable convictions, in spaces where doubt and complexity reign. To see beyond the confirmation bias lock is to glimpse a wider, richer world. A world where your beliefs are not prisons, but doorways, open to transformation. So, when your mind feels certain, pause to wonder, what are you choosing to see, and what remains hidden? The lock may comfort you, but it also confines. The courage to unlock your mind may be the greatest act of freedom, an act that invites truth not as enemy, but as teacher. In this unlocking, you find not weakness, but the strength to grow beyond the limits of your own certainty into the vast, unfolding mystery of reality itself. The decision paralysis freeze. When faced with a multitude of choices, your mind becomes a battlefield, a place where possibility collides with uncertainty. The promise of freedom, once thrilling, transforms into a cage of indecision. Too many options stretch before you like endless branches in a forest, each path promising something different, yet none offering clear direction. In this overwhelming landscape, your brain does something remarkable. It freezes. This is the decision paralysis freeze, a neurological shutdown where the abundance of choice halts action entirely. Freedom, stripped of clarity, morphs into terror. Imagine standing before a vast buffet, each dish more tempting than the last, but your appetite wanes with every additional option. The effort to evaluate, to weigh, to predict outcomes becomes exhausting. The brain's executive functions, responsible for planning and decision-making, become overloaded. The stress of potential regret, choosing wrong, missing out, creates a feedback loop that inhibits movement. You find yourself stuck, unable to commit, trapped by the very freedom that was meant to empower you. This phenomenon has roots in psychology and neuroscience. Studies show that when presented with too many choices, people experience increased anxiety and decreased satisfaction. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision hub, can only process so much information before it fatigues. The result is cognitive paralysis, a state where indecision feels safer than the risk of error. The terror is not just about making a choice, but about the endless possibilities that must be foregone. In everyday life, this paralysis manifests in countless ways. From simple decisions, what to eat, what to wear, to life-altering ones like career moves or relationships, the glut of options can stall progress. You scroll endlessly through menus or online stores, unable to pick, waiting for a sign that never comes. You postpone commitments, hoping clarity will emerge, yet the fog thickens. The mind's hunger for certainty clashes with the vast uncertainty of choice. This freeze is compounded by the modern world's explosion of options. Technology, globalization, and consumer culture have expanded choices exponentially. While this abundance reflects freedom, it also demands greater cognitive effort and emotional resilience. The brain, evolved for simpler environments, struggles to adapt, leading to what some call choice overload. Yet, decision paralysis is not weakness. It is a survival mechanism, an attempt by the brain to protect you from potential harm, loss, or regret. In uncertainty, freezing may feel like safety, a pause to gather strength. But prolonged paralysis erodes confidence, stifles growth, and deepens anxiety. Breaking free requires strategies that restore clarity and reduce overload. Simplifying choices, setting priorities, trusting intuition, and embracing imperfection can dismantle the freeze. Cognitive behavioral techniques help reframe fear of mistakes, transforming paralysis into action. Mindfulness encourages presence, reducing the spiral of what-ifs. Consider the artist overwhelmed by creative options, the professional paralyzed by career possibilities, the lover uncertain about commitment. Each faces the same neurological trap, where freedom becomes a burden. Yet, through courage and practice, they learn to choose imperfectly, to act despite doubt, reclaiming agency from paralysis. The decision paralysis freeze reveals a profound tension in human freedom. True liberty is not endless choice, but the ability to act with purpose amid uncertainty. When clarity fades, terror rises, but within terror lies the seed of transformation. To move forward is to embrace freedom not as endless paths, but as the power to select a way, to commit, and to live with the unknown. So, next time you feel stuck in the maze of options, remember this. Paralysis is the brain's plea for clarity, not defeat. Listen, simplify, choose, even imperfectly, and step into freedom's true form, action. The self-undoing loop. There is a subtle yet powerful cycle that traps many minds. A loop where the promise of peace becomes shadowed by doubt, and joy, when it arises, is met with suspicion. This is the self-undoing loop, a psychological pattern in which the brain, unable to trust calm and happiness, instinctively sabotages these states. If things go well, the mind braces itself, waiting for punishment or disaster to follow, as if peace is an illusion and joy a temporary reprieve from inevitable pain. This loop is rooted in ancient survival instincts. In a world full of unpredictable dangers, the brain evolved to anticipate threats, not comfort. When peace arrives, it can feel foreign, almost dangerous, because the mind is wired to expect disruption. This leads to a form of cognitive dissonance, a conflict between the current calm and the ingrained belief that calm won't last. The brain, caught in this tension, often undermines positive experiences, pushing the person back into familiar anxiety or distress. Consider someone who has endured prolonged hardship or trauma. For them, moments of happiness are rare and unsettling. Their brain, conditioned to vigilance and survival, may generate self-sabotaging thoughts or behaviors that disrupt joy. This might look like withdrawing from relationships, provoking conflict, or engaging in harmful habits, acts that feel unconscious but serve to restore the expected balance of discomfort. Neuroscientific research supports this pattern. The brain's threat detection centers, such as the amygdala, remain hyperactive in individuals with a history of trauma or chronic stress. This hypervigilance means the brain scans constantly for signs that peace is fragile, triggering anxiety or defensive reactions when calm persists. The prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotions and assesses safety, may struggle to override this ingrained response. The self-undoing loop also manifests in everyday life beyond trauma. Even people without severe distress can fall into this pattern. Have you ever noticed how, after a streak of good fortune, doubts creep in? This can't last, or something bad is coming. These thoughts create tension that can lead to behaviors or decisions undermining success or happiness, fulfilling the brain's expectation of instability. This loop is a form of psychological self-fulfilling prophecy. By doubting peace, the brain creates conditions that disrupt it. This feedback cycle becomes a trap where attempts to hold on to joy are sabotaged from within. Breaking free requires conscious awareness and intentional rewiring of these automatic patterns. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy help identify and challenge the negative beliefs underlying the loop. Mindfulness teaches tolerance for uncertainty and the capacity to experience peace without immediate suspicion. Gradual exposure to positive experiences paired with emotional regulation skills can retrain the brain to accept calm and joy as safe and enduring. Real-life stories illuminate this struggle. Survivors of hardship who learn to embrace peace often describe an initial discomfort, an almost paradoxical fear of happiness itself. Yet, with patience and support, they find that peace can become a foundation rather than a fragile illusion. Joy no longer signals an impending fall, but a state to be nurtured and sustained. Understanding the self-undoing loop fosters compassion for ourselves and others. It reveals how deeply the brain's protective mechanisms can shape behavior, even to our detriment. Recognizing this loop is the first step toward disrupting it, opening the possibility for lasting peace and authentic joy. So, when you find yourself doubting calm or undermining happiness, remember the brain's ancient wiring, its cautious watchfulness in a world that once demanded constant alertness. But also remember that you have the power to rewrite these patterns, to teach your mind that peace is not a trap, and joy is not a fleeting shadow, but a right and reality. In stepping beyond the self-undoing loop, you reclaim the possibility of living fully, embracing calm without fear, savoring joy without guilt, and trusting that peace, once earned, can endure. The emotional disguise reflex. You feel one thing deep inside, a trembling fear, a fragile love, but your outward expression tells a different story. You mask your vulnerability with armor forged from learned habits, and your brain, in its silent calculus, disguises raw emotion behind a veneer of anger, sarcasm, or indifference. This is the emotional disguise reflex, a primal survival mechanism where what you truly feel is hidden beneath a carefully crafted facade. From infancy, your brain learns that certain feelings are unsafe to show. Fear might invite harm. Love might lead to rejection. To protect the self, the mind develops a reflex, an automatic switch that replaces delicate truths with sharper, more socially acceptable expressions. Anger stands in for fear, its fierce energy warding off threats. Sarcasm cloaks love, its biting edge deflecting closeness. The reflex operates beneath conscious thought, shaping how you interact, often leaving you misunderstood, even by yourself. Neuroscience reveals that this reflex is rooted in the brain's limbic system, where emotional processing intertwines with threat detection. The amygdala triggers defense responses, while the prefrontal cortex negotiates social appropriateness. When vulnerable feelings arise, the brain's swift judgment can reroute these into disguised emotions, a protective dance learned through experience and culture. Consider the friend who lashes out with anger when deeply hurt, or the partner who responds with sarcasm when longing for affection. Their words and tone mislead, concealing pain and yearning beneath layers of defense. The emotional disguise becomes a language of survival, a way to maintain distance and safety while craving connection. But the reflex can trap you in cycles of misunderstanding and isolation. Others see the anger but not the fear, the sarcasm but not the love. You may even start believing the mask, confusing your true feelings with the defenses that hide them. This disconnect fuels loneliness, frustration, and a yearning for authenticity that feels just out of reach. Breaking the emotional disguise, reflex requires self-awareness and compassion. It means learning to recognize the masks you wear, the feelings behind them, and the fears they protect against. It is a journey toward vulnerability, slow, courageous, and deeply healing. Therapy, mindfulness, and honest communication become tools to gently lower defenses and reveal the true emotional landscape within. You are more than your masks. Beneath the anger, sarcasm, or indifference lies a heart longing to be understood. The reflex that once protected you can transform into a bridge toward authenticity and connection. Embracing your true feelings, even when they feel unsafe, is the path to freedom and belonging. So when your words betray your heart, pause. Listen beneath the disguise. Honor the feelings waiting patiently to be seen. The emotional disguise. Reflex is not your truth. It is a shield. And true strength lies in choosing when to lower it. The belief reinforcement grid. You listen to the world through a filter shaped by your beliefs, a grid that allows in only what aligns with who you are. This is not stubbornness nor simple closed-mindedness. It is your brain's deep protective mechanism, a reinforcement grid designed to guard the fragile architecture of your identity. The mind seeks harmony, and anything that threatens to disrupt this delicate balance is quietly, persistently excluded. Imagine walking through a dense forest, where only paths aligned with your footsteps remain visible, while others fade into shadow. Your beliefs are the trails you know and trust. New ideas, uncomfortable truths, or conflicting perspectives are the overgrown paths. Ignored not because you refuse to see, but because your brain prioritizes stability and coherence. The identity you have built depends on this selective hearing. This selective perception is rooted in the brain's survival strategies. Maintaining a coherent sense of self is crucial for functioning in a complex world. When new information clashes with your core beliefs, your brain experiences cognitive dissonance, a painful tension between old and new. To reduce this discomfort, it tunes out discordant voices, reinforcing the familiar to protect your psychological integrity. This grid is reinforced constantly. Confirmation bias guides what you read, watch, and listen to. Algorithms on social media amplify this effect, feeding you content that echoes your worldview. Friends and communities form around shared beliefs, creating echo chambers that shield you further. Each reinforcement strengthens the grid, making alternative perspectives feel distant, alien, even threatening. The consequences are profound. While this grid offers comfort and clarity, it can also blind you to complexity and nuance. It can entrench you in falsehoods, deepen divisions, and limit growth. The world beyond your beliefs becomes a foreign landscape, harder to navigate, harder to understand. Yet, this mechanism is not immutable. Awareness is the first step to loosening the grip of the belief reinforcement grid. Recognizing that your brain is wired to protect identity, not out of stubbornness but out of survival instinct, allows you to approach conflicting ideas with curiosity rather than fear. Engaging with diverse perspectives becomes an act of courage and expansion. It requires patience to sit with discomfort, humility to question your certainties, and openness to change. It means stepping onto the overgrown paths, even when they seem unfamiliar or unsettling. Learning to listen beyond your grid enriches your understanding of the world and yourself. It invites empathy, bridges divides, and fosters growth. It transforms the mind from a fortress into a garden, where ideas can cross-pollinate and flourish. So, when you find yourself hearing only what agrees with you, pause. Reflect on the grid that filters your perceptions and ask, what am I missing? What fears or attachments keep me within these walls? What might I discover if I let the grid soften? Your brain guards your identity, yes, but you are more than its protector. You are a seeker, a learner, capable of expanding beyond the boundaries of belief. In doing so, you free yourself to live more fully, think more deeply, and connect more genuinely. Because the world is vast, and truth is richer than any single path. The belief reinforcement grid is strong, but your curiosity is stronger. The reverse empathy switch. You feel it before you understand it. The overwhelming surge of someone else's pain, joy, or fear, flooding your own heart until your own feelings fade into the background. This is the reverse empathy switch, a paradox where deep compassion flips into self-erasure. Instead of a balanced exchange, your empathy becomes a consuming tide that drowns out your own emotional voice. You become a vessel, absorbing the emotions of others so fully that your own identity, needs, and boundaries blur, leaving you lost in a sea of borrowed feelings. Empathy is often celebrated as a noble gift, the ability to truly understand and share another's experience. But the brain's emotional wiring is delicate. Mirror neurons fire in response to others' expressions, simulating their emotional state within you. For most, this creates connection and compassion. Yet for some, especially those with heightened sensitivity, the switch reverses. Their nervous system amplifies others' emotions so intensely that it overrides their self-awareness. Compassion morphs into a form of emotional sacrifice, where caring means losing oneself. This switch is fueled by an urgent need to relieve not only others' suffering, but also the distress it causes within. Your brain cannot distinguish fully between self and other in these moments, triggering stress responses and emotional overload. You may become hypervigilant to the moods around you, constantly adjusting, accommodating, and absorbing. Your own feelings become difficult to access or trust because they are obscured beneath layers of others' emotions. The consequences are profound. Over time, the reverse empathy switch can lead to burnout, anxiety, and identity confusion. You might struggle to set boundaries, feeling guilty for prioritizing your own needs. Relationships may feel exhausting as you give endlessly without replenishment. The compassion that once felt like strength becomes a vulnerability, exploited by emotional overwhelm. Examples are common among caregivers, therapists, or those close to trauma survivors, roles demanding constant emotional attunement. Yet even in everyday life, the switch can flip during intense family conflicts, friendships, or workplaces where emotional dynamics are fraught. You find yourself carrying burdens that aren't yours, shouldering pain not meant for your shoulders, and forgetting who you are beneath the weight. Healing begins with awareness, recognizing when your empathy becomes self-erasure. Mindfulness and grounding techniques help re-anchor your sense of self amid emotional storms. Learning to distinguish your feelings from those of others is crucial. Setting compassionate boundaries is not selfish, but essential for sustaining true empathy. It allows you to care deeply while preserving your emotional health. The reverse empathy switch teaches a vital lesson. Empathy is not limitless sacrifice. It is a dance between connection and self-preservation. To give fully, you must first protect the wellspring of your own feelings. In honoring your emotional reality, you create a space where genuine compassion can thrive, balanced, sustainable, and life-affirming. So when you feel the tide of others' emotions rise, remember to check for the switch. Allow yourself permission to breathe, to feel your own heart, and to step back when the flood threatens to consume. True empathy begins not with losing yourself, but with knowing yourself deeply enough to hold others without vanishing. In this balance lies the power to heal, to connect, and to love without losing who you are. The shame lockout response. You make one mistake, a slip, a stumble, a momentary lapse, and suddenly, everything inside you shifts. It's as if the world tilts, and the very core of who you are fractures under the weight of that single error. Your brain, in its relentless drive to protect you, does something drastic. It locks down the entire system. This is the shame lockout response, a neurological and psychological shutdown, where one mistake is no longer just an action, but becomes a defining mark on your identity. Error is rewritten as essence, and the mind retreats behind walls built from self-judgment and silence. Imagine the sudden surge of shame as a warning siren, a red light flashing inside your nervous system. It signals danger, not from the external world, but from within. The brain activates circuits designed to minimize exposure, to avoid further harm. In this state, you might shut down emotionally, withdraw socially, or silence your inner voice. It is not mere embarrassment or guilt. It is a full-scale lockdown, where vulnerability becomes unbearable and defense mechanisms seal the gates tightly. Neuroscience shows that shame engages brain regions associated with pain, fear, and social threat. It triggers a cascade of stress hormones, rewiring neural pathways in ways that reinforce negative self-beliefs. The mistake, once a single event, becomes entangled with your self-concept. This fusion distorts perception. You are no longer a person who erred. You are the error itself. The mind's protective response ironically traps you in a prison of your own making. This lockout can manifest as perfectionism, avoidance, or self-sabotage. You may refuse to try again, fearing that any effort risks reopening the wound. Socially, it breeds isolation because exposing yourself feels too dangerous. Internally, it fosters a harsh inner critic that relentlessly replays the failure, deepening the seal. The shame lockout response silences growth and healing. Examples are everywhere. Students paralyzed by one poor grade, professionals haunted by a single misstep, loved ones withdrawing after a moment of conflict. The brain's response is universal but intensely personal. It reflects the deep human need for acceptance and the terror of rejection. When that need feels threatened, the mind chooses shutdown over risk. Breaking free from the shame lockout requires gentle compassion and deliberate practice. Therapy often focuses on differentiating the self from the mistake, unpacking the narrative that error equals identity. Mindfulness teaches presence without judgment, creating space for vulnerability without collapse. Gradual exposure to risk, supported by empathy, helps the brain relearn safety beyond shame. Recognizing the shame lockout as a survival mechanism reframes the experience. It is not a moral failing, but a deeply ingrained attempt to protect fragile self-worth. With patience, understanding, and support, the gates can open again, allowing light and connection to return. In your own life, when you feel frozen by shame, remember this response is the brain's call for safety, not your sentence. You are more than your mistakes. Your identity is vast, resilient, and worthy of grace. The lockout is temporary. The system can reboot. And beyond the silence, your true self waits, ready to speak again.